Okay, so everybody, this is going to be a really quick hangout, maybe about 2 hours at the most, because I got to have somebody else use the computer here to do their debate tonight with Veckel. But we are having a really good discussion with Remy, who's a younger creationist that hangs in that younger creationist circle. And I was telling him, like I've been telling other people, I love the conversations. Oops, shoot, I gotta mute this. 1 sec.
Nice work, JD.
Remy, he was just introducing you, but he's had to silence himself.
Should I introduce myself, or what's going on?
Yeah,
Go for it. Well, he's trying to turn off the live feed or the YouTube video or something.
Yeah. So I'm 34 years old. I live in Ontario, Canada. I'm a very strong Christian believer, but I'm also a critical thinker to a degree. So I only have a finished high school diploma, so that's it. I kind of failed science, but ever since I got out of high school, I kind of engaged in my own pace of learning science. Go ahead.
I don't know, it's a technical glitch day today, right? I mean, first I couldn't get the start button to come up, and then I freaking had to go silence out of the video because you can't stop it ahead of time, right? You can't silence it. It's really very poorly designed because we all have this problem. But I was just telling people that what was happening was that we were having a really good off-air discussion in Nate Cunningham's room, and his hangouts are pretty cool. And I was just like, let's just bring it to my channel because I was trying to explain to people that we want to have conversations with people. We're not into the sophistry. We're certainly not into the rhetoric. We just want to talk and discuss with people that can have a civil conversation. And I've always known you to be somebody who can. You've demonstrated it on prior occasions. So I was just like, let's just come to my hangout and talk for some of the reasons about why you're younger creationists, and especially the educational portion that we're talking about, as far as is it really worth it to get an education like Jackson Hole University or Bible Patriot University or Liberty University when they're unaccredited? So yeah, I mean, go ahead. Let's continue from where I'm trying to think of exactly where we kind of left off. And I was going to do a little housekeeping, but I guess I'll just kind of delve right into it, and these things might come up as we talk. I mean, were you raised a younger creationist?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No. I wasn't raised. Well, I wasn't raised on any of those axioms. Although until '96, I guess I leaned towards evolution. So, but I was raised in a Christian family. But in all, if I had to be actually honest with myself, I wasn't actually a Christian until about '98. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, you're a theist though, at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I was trying to be, but it was more, if I was to be honest, I would be like, who am I kidding, kind of an attitude.
And what made you relate younger creationism to Christianity?
What made me relate to it?
Yeah, as far as them being related. In other words, to become a Christian, why did you think it was important to also at the same time adhere to younger creationist models?
Oh, I didn't. I didn't think it was synonymously important or self-exclusive. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jake.
Sorry, I was going to say, did you become a regular Christian first for a while, and then was there something that pushed you to go from what would be considered really the norm for Christianity to an older creationist viewpoint, or did they kind of come in tandem?
Yeah, neither view came into play for the other. It's had nothing. No, I didn't base being Christian off of the age of the earth, and I didn't base the age of the earth anything to do with my religion. It wasn't like that. It wasn't when I was. It wasn't the point of coming to the proposition of young earth or whatever the age may be based off of what I already believed. Rather, it was because I was at a seminar and it was presented with not proof, but perplexing questions of why, what ifs, and anomalies in science that we all can't really relate to. That got me thinking, and that had nothing to do with me being a Christian first.
So two things. Go ahead a second. You don't think it's a salvational issue then?
No.
The belief.
In all honesty, no.
Okay, so do you accept that there might be people that are just as Christian as you that are not young Earth creationists? Is that in your worldview? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Heavy. Yeah, go ahead. I got a follow up with Remy, but yeah, go ahead, Heavy.
Oh, no, it's just a quick question. Remy, when you arrived at this, was it from a point of, was it like faith-based, or was it science-based, or something in science? Was it faith or science? I'm just curious.
Yeah, at the time, I was admittedly not scientifically minded whatsoever, and I can't remember if I was in high school yet. I think I was in grade 9, and I honestly failed my first semester of grade 9 science, and I had to repeat it. So I actually, because I failed it because of chemistry. I couldn't, for the life of me, I couldn't understand atoms and revolving their orbits and how many elements and how many of this and that, and so even today it kind of blows my mind. So, anyways. But, the one night that my dad took me to, to a seminar in another church far, far away from to listen to a speaker on the subject, I didn't know what my dad meant or what young Earth. I didn't understand it. And that night, it wasn't completely, it's got to be young Earth or anything like that. It wasn't until about 2008, I think it was, when I started hearing more from other speakers, that it kind of then it kind of dawned on me that there's still a lot claimed by both sides, but I had to admit that the fact that there are, say, fossils of fish who were petrified in motion, either giving birth or swallowing something, that couldn't happen over millions of years, not even if a wave on the shore smacked the fish and its prey onto the beach, and it died flapping while it's trying to catch it. It still didn't add up. So it kind of made, from their point, it's like there's still something to this that makes me feel like no could have happened.
So you're saying that the seminars, and I'm familiar with all the seminars. I mean, I know where they all stem from, and I actually have a copy of the Creationist Seminar Handbook number 9 edition.
Sure.
Would you say, though, if you were given examples of not only reasonable but actually pretty scientific explanations for things that the Creationist Handbook brings up, or that these seminars bring up, where you, as self-admittedly and not that scientific, would you evaluate it differently, or is it something that, because they do bring up sometimes not difficult questions, I don't think any of them are difficult, but they're, to a person who doesn't really have an interest or know much about the topics, they do seem to be, oh, well, maybe they have a point, but when you really delve into them, they're nothing to any of these seminars. So did you actually look into any of the responses to maybe some of the questions you had been presented at the time?
I'm sure I have. Nothing comes directly to mind, but I'm sure I've even questioned other creationists on how they just jump on a conclusion, hook, line, and sinker, and defend it without proper explanation or evidence. I'd rather hear someone using science from an actual science, non-Christian science book to defend what their position is, rather than just simply saying, well, because the word says in the Bible. I respect more to hear it from an actual scientific point of view.
What do you think was one of your bigger issues that you had? Obviously, it wasn't a fish swallowing a fish. That can be explained multiple different ways. I mean, obviously, a mudslide or something. There are rapid burials that do occur. we see these things. So that could be an alternative explanation. That probably wasn't the linchpin. What mainly did you think you personally had an issue with as far as the questions that were brought up in this seminar that made you think, oh, maybe there might be something to this young Earth creationism?
I'm drawing a blank.
I'm gonna ask you some good questions, man.
No, it's just like it's one of the things I would have to get back to you on.
That's fine. No, that's fine.
Remy, sorry, can I also ask, because one of the things that I've often found as well when talking with creationists is a lot of people seem to think that if you disprove evolution, that seems in a lot of people's minds to make their particular creation story win by default. Almost like if you could prove evolution is wrong, then suddenly creationism is by default then true. You would need something more than just evolution is wrong to say, right, this particular creation story is the right one, because there are thousands and thousands of creation stories that have been produced throughout history, most of them with the same level of evidence, which in my opinion is quite low. What not only caused you to disbelieve the current scientific evidence for what most people accept, but then caused you to go the extra step and say, well, this story is more true than the thousands of others?
Trying to figure out which angle of that I want to take first.
No, it's just because you said earlier that your Christianity and creationism came separately, which suggests which would imply that you didn't come to, okay, I'm Christian, and therefore, yeah, it would say that in your mind that you're not just going, I'm Christian, therefore the creation story I'm going to believe is by default the Christian one.
Yeah, because obviously becoming an adult, I'd have to. Well, actually, I can't say I'd have to, because obviously there's many we have to deal with that aren't as honest with themselves and aren't as critical thinking. To say that say if I did have a Christianity before I learned of the proposition of young Earth or any Earth, a model from the Bible, it have to allow the faith to define what you believe as the biology of this planet. It would be a rather delusional, I guess, to say. It's a really harsh term, but it would have come to a point where I would hope that I would if that was how I came to, and it wasn't, say, my Christianity says this must be true. If that's what many years down the line, if I were to think back on there, that would make me ignorant or arrogant or bigoted on the subject, because basing it on, well, this is what I believe, therefore it must be. That's not critical thinking. That's just jumping to a conclusion. Same can be said about some evolutionary point of view, because you were brought up understanding of how these fossils got into the layers they were. Therefore, it must have been laid upon the ground in a specific fashion, in a specific time period, in a specific sequence. I pull both in the question. I'd rather pull both in the question for their own standpoint of the evidence for the proposition itself, rather than to allow the biology of this planet be dictated about what you already believe before. So as if you're a child and you're brought to church to, do you accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and now and let that dictate, well, how old do you think the Earth is? You're obviously conflicted and compromised based on what you already believe, rather than looking at it from a totally outside angle. So I'd rather think of myself as looking at it from the outside in, from both perspectives. So I can look at I'm sure I've looked at some evolutionary evidence and said, yeah, there's a good case for that. But it's not necessarily enough to conclude that the Earth is necessarily billions of years old.
And Jacob, we have to be careful in distinguishing this. I don't want to group everybody together as far as creationists, because there's different mindsets. There are people I have engaged with, Jacob, that have said pretty much, well, if evolution isn't true, then creationism is your other option, which we all know is a logical fallacy. We all get that.
Well, the flat earthers are doing that to us Christians as well. Because you believe the Bible, then you must believe it's flat. I'm sorry, but you can't conclude.
Yeah, that's an argument for ignorance, of course. But I will tell you, Jacob, if you actually go to some of these sites, though, they make evolution out to be a dichotomy such that creationism and evolution cannot go hand in hand. And so they basically, they're not making the argument per se, and I'm not talking about Remy per se, but creationists in general. They're not saying if evolution isn't true, therefore creationism. What they're saying is you cannot have them both be true, which is not the case. I believe they both could be. It's in the trivial sense, not young Earth creationism, but in the trivial sense. But if evolution isn't true, it does bolster their model, they believe. Because it takes away an option, right, of how things became into being in the trivial sense. Now, again, I'm a compatibilist when it comes to that. I think it's perfectly compatible to think that God created everything and evolution to be true. But if the young Earth model, which we're specifically focusing on, that is not possible. It is one or the other in the young Earth position, most cases. So they say if evolution isn't true, it bolsters the young Earth position rather than actually, is the conclusion that it must be that because the other one has been disproven. So I don't think they fall into that logical trap, but they do make it out to be, well, if evolution isn't true, therefore young Earth creation is far more likely from an objective reasoning point of view. Does that make sense?
It's just because I find a lot of them tend to work on the basis that all they need to do is disprove evolution, not that there's all this work ahead of them that they then have to prove their particular brand of creationism as the alternate. A lot of them seem to think, well, if we've disproved evolution, then we're done, we win.
That's true.
And that's why I was checking, and I am pleased to see that Remy has a much more intellectually honest assessment of how he's going through it.
Yeah, and that's why I asked if it was faith-based, because that's like we would approach asking questions differently from if you was basing it on science. Like if someone comes to you and says, well, by faith, I accept that the Earth is 6,000 years old. I can accept that answer better than saying, than someone saying they're trying to disprove science or whatever, if that makes sense.
Well, that's why I very rarely debate people about what religion they've got, because when it comes to like the origin of the universe, I don't know how it happened. Right. Personally, I think the best answer is we don't know. But if you have faith that there's something more than that, I'm not going to debate you about that. That's fine. Right. But when someone says, I would debate flat earthers, and they say, no, the world is flat, and I say, well, no, we have this evidence that that is wrong, I don't see that as a religious conversation. It is now a scientific debate.
You make a very good observation on 2 points, Jacob. One, when we talk about young Earth creations, and I'm not addressing it from the religious point of view. I'm addressing it from the scientific point of view. Okay, I leave the religious aspect up to General Han Solo, who's very knowledgeable. He's very good, and maybe Remy would love to discuss a theological stance just from the Bible, whether it supports it or not. I don't get much into that. But what you said about negative evidence is spot on, because if you go to creation.com, they have something called I think it's called 101 evidences for a young Earth. You guys familiar with that?
I haven't seen that particular one.
Maybe somebody can link it because
sounds familiar. I think it was. I think I've heard something.
Hey, Holler, can you look it up real quick? It's basically on creation.com. It's like I think it's called 101 evidences for a young Earth. And if you look at most of them, I would say that 90% or more of them are not any evidences for a young Earth, but it's negative evidence against an old Earth, right? It's something trying to disprove evolution. It's something to disprove radiometric dating. These are all attempts to provide negative evidence against why the Earth evidence is old, but that is not evidence for why the Earth is young, right? So it's kind of misleading there.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Sorry, watch out, it's got sound.
Was that at creation.com?
Yeah.
Watch out, it's got sound. It started speaking quite loudly just then.
Okay. So, I mean, how many does it say in there? I mean, anyways, I'm sure you've been to many of these sites, right, Remy?
No.
You don't go. You've never been to creation.com or Institute of Creation Research or?
Well, I'm not saying I've never been there. I just don't make it. I just don't make it a habit.
Where do you get your your information as far as the young Earth claims then? Just from other
One of my favorites recently is a very distinguished YouTube channel called Northwest Creation Network, and it actually features either still active or retired or whatever actual science majors like biologists and geologists, and they actually go through the science in seminars, and they're pretty clear on what they teach.
are they young Earthers?
I don't think all of them are, but the majority, yeah.
Oh, well, could you put me in touch with them? I mean, that's why. I mean, I would love to have more conversations with people like that. If there are people.
I don't know if they actually are engaged.
Oh, you don't know this stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if they're actually engaged with talking in this community, but
well, that can be understandable.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
I think it's just somebody who owns the rights to and is associated with their association to be allowed to publish their videos, their seminars on recorded.
Gotcha. Well, this kind of goes in a little bit of the housekeeping that I wanted to do earlier. That I guess I'll bring it up now. I had mentioned to you prior that on my channel, which I get a lot of inflammatory comments about, mostly saying that I don't want to engage with anybody of a real knowledge level, which is kind of absurd because we have reached out to many of these young Earth creationist scientists. I know for a fact there's emails to Tompkins, who's a geneticist, young Earth creationist. I myself have talked to Dr. Jonathan Safadi on multiple occasions. He's busy with one of his book things, so he wouldn't come online. But I have access to him by sending him messages. And there was Jay Hall, who was a young Earth creationist author, who has a master's degree in mathematics. I mean, we look for people with an education. However, not everybody does, and I get that. It's just is equally entertaining and informative, and something that's worthy of conversation for somebody like yourself, who self-admittedly doesn't know a lot about science. So I'm not really going to go into the technicology of the science, but just have a conversation with. That's what we're looking for: having a conversation with young Earthers to suss out why they're young Earth creationists and see where the pitfalls lie of where they're not connecting with things like evolution or scientific models that demonstrate that the Earth is not young. Does that make sense? Because we're not looking for low-hanging fruit, and you're not low-hanging fruit for that very reason, because you're willing to talk about these things, regardless if you're not that hip on science. You're willing to discuss things. That is great, man. That's just amazing. You have my full props for that. You really do.
That's one of the reasons why I've taken recently because even though I haven't been able to do video debates, I still do a small amount of in conversation with people. I've been having a chat for about a year with a guy called Golden Weather, back and forth about creationism and stuff. But I've realized, no offense to you, Remy, but a lot of creationists I've spoken to tend to be in your sort of area where I'm speaking to them about scientific subjects, and I'm finding that a lot of the creationists I speak to are pre-GCSE level in England in terms of their understanding of science as a whole. I don't know whether it's something to do with America or Canada or just the people who end up leaning towards creationism. I know it's not all of them, but that's why I've taken to, in a lot of debates now, not trying to discuss the really in-depth scientific subjects, because I'm not a scientist, I'm an artist. I just happen to do children's illustrated books on evolution. That's what I like to do. But I find that what I end up debating more is actually where directly you can point out to where a creationist that they're referring to has lied. It's one of the bits I do with William Free on Nate's channel. That's my take I've taken with him recently, is when he posts something and it's like evolutionists believe birds evolved from dinosaurs, and it's got a picture of a robin and a diplodocus. And I just say, well,
you're
okay.
Funny. Come on, I take him as humorous.
Wrong dinosaur.
No, but this is something that he's put up and says, no, this is look how stupid this is. This is obviously untrue. And then I try and, because Nate's William's problem with it is the fact that he thinks scientists are lying. What I try and point out is, no, this is where people are lying to you, because this isn't.
May I just interject really quickly there? Is that yes, they're wrong, but at the in the view from the more clinical, the more scientific paper view, that because there's at least two different major classes of dinosaur, but the confusion is on the term dinosaur, where you have the Allosaur and Raptor version. I can't remember what the name of that family of dinosaurs is.
Theropod?
Yes, those are the ones that are supposedly purported to be the grandfathers for what we have as the ostrich and what have you. Yeah. And the other ones that are the more the Diplodocus and what have you, they had nothing to do with the tree of that are responsible for the birds, but both families in general are still called dinosaurs. So it's not necessarily of course it's a lack of further study on the creationist part to not do a study, but it's also on the part of the entire nationality of the world to still claim in a broad sense dinosaur rather than distinguishing from a younger age. Okay, so you have the theropods, you have the pterosaur, and you have the whatever. So
sauropods.
Pterosaurs aren't dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Right.
And so of course the creationists should be more specific. Okay, so you have the sauropods, who are not, and distinguish.
Well, here's the thing I noticed. I find this to be the case. Okay, one, I mean, obviously dinosaurs is a clade, so there's reasons why we do grouping of that. And Isaiah's or Jadig's would be the two to actually go into that level of detail. But what I found is that dinosaurs and birds and whale homologies are the two most talked about things in the community from creationism, because those are the videos you find most on YouTube. Okay? And I noticed when you start delving into other parts of the phylogenetic tree and other parts of lineages, then there's really not that much discussion going on. And they just kind of ignore all the evidence of the phylogenetic tree that we know for pretty well certainty, right? I mean, I use that term in scientific
synaptids. My favorite one to discuss is synaptids now, because creationists avoid it like the plague.
Go ahead. Talk about synapses.
Synaptids are the mammal-like reptiles that we have a very clear evolution from reptiles to reptiles with where the jawbones start moving and becoming the inner ear. And
right.
If you get what I've done a few times with this guy Goldenweather is have the really early stage, and he will point to a few bits and say, yeah, these are the same kind. You get a later stage, are these the same kind? And then you do the bits in the middle, and you say, these are the same kind. If you move it again and repeat the same questions, he'll then say, well, these are the same kind. And they all just suddenly become each other's kind, until eventually you kind of just have to go, well, where does one begin and one end? And yeah.
Yeah, the kind keeps moving. Yeah, the kind keeps moving. And what he's talking about, Remy, is there's actually little bones in the jawbone of these reptiles that over time you can actually see through the transitional fossils have migrated up to become the inner ear, the hammer, the sternum, the anvil. You can actually see the lineage in the fossil record, right? I mean, we have a pretty clear understanding of that.
They're probably one of the best examples of a long period of evolution that is out there. And it's never mentioned ever by any, because this is the thing I always find is that if ever in a scientific situation, if you think an opposing hypothesis is wrong, you will respond to all of it, not just the bits that you think are the weakest, but all of it. You'll take on its strongest bits. But creationism tends to find the few bits that they're comfortable with and ignores the rest. It doesn't tend to mention other bits. It avoids them.
May I go back briefly, because I'll go back to this topic, but to the dichotomy of both sides is the fact that, well, maybe I can't really say that because it's not a fact, but the case where it's also on the academic side where if a creationist says we shouldn't be teaching evolution in schools, of course, I'm against the broad statement that we shouldn't, but because it can't really omit it from existence, but rather the argument becomes, well, you can't remove it because it's fact, and then we eventually get the persons to admit, well, we can't really say it's fact because we don't know everything, but we can conclude because of likely sources and likely evidence, of course, but that's not what I'm getting at. It's usually, but that argument goes down to the point where well, if we can't teach evolution in class, you have to fill it in with something. That's jumping to a conclusion that you have to fill it in with something, rather than being honest with your students and saying, okay, you can pursue pursue creative understanding of biology, which does not limit you to evolution or creation or what have you. Even if you want to believe the Earth is a turtle, that's what you want to believe. But of course, you're going to be nailed to the cross on that idea, rather than saying, well, this is what is going to be taught in university, and you're an idiot if you say otherwise.
Well,
So it's more honest and more respectable to say to the student, you have your availability to choose from to pursue the idea of geology, archaeology, and biology, and what have you.
well,
Or you can pursue them as a lump sum and come up with your own conclusion, rather than letting us drill it into you. It would be better for the student, like our grandfathers who weren't forced to believe something, who were given the broadest horizons to develop what the world is to be understood, what lens to look at it through. Rather, today we're giving the kids the lens to look through. So I agree. If we were to say, if a creationist is going to be arrogant, saying no, we need to teach them creation, like say Kent Hovind, I think he's wrong too. You can't force a child to listen to creation either, because that's giving the child a lens. You're not giving the child optimism. You're not giving the child open horizons. You're not giving the child the ability to learn and to pursue. And so, of course, in the 9/10 of the time, the child is going to pursue evolution. That should be up to the child, rather than telling the child, well, I'm sorry, but you're wrong.
I think there's a misunderstanding
that's what I was
a lot of times about, like, in school, like evolution. I think in a science book is not that there's not that much in the science books, I don't think. But what I was going to say was, they're in a science class, part of the science class or biology class, and it may deal with the theory of evolution.
Right.
Okay. The bottom line on that is the children do not have to believe it or accept it. They're in there to take the courses. They're going to have tests, and they'll be tested on this. They may well believe in Ken Ham and all that. That's fine. But as far as being in the class, they need to do what is required of them in the class, because outside the classroom, it doesn't matter. They don't have to accept evolution or believe in it.
Well, it goes a little deeper than that. Let me clear up a misunderstanding here, because there's a couple things. I had a video on this, and maybe some of you guys watched it or not. When we say evolution is fact, that is a misstatement in a way. One, a fact is an empirical piece of information. Okay, so we cannot say that evolution is a fact, because a noun cannot be a fact. Okay, that's like saying chair is a fact. Now you say evolution is observed, and that is a fact. That is perfectly fine. But when we say evolution is a fact, we're just basically saying that. We're saying that evolution is observed. That is unequivocal scientific fact. And as Jade pointed out on the side, facts don't have to be absolute. Facts are our best provisional understanding. But in this particular case, it is a fact that we do observe evolution every day. Observe evolution. Evolution is observed in the laboratories, right? So when we say evolution is fact, that's all we're saying. We're saying we observe it. Now, the other aspect of evolution, the theory portion of it, right? Evolutionary theory, that is the model, right, that we use to describe observations of evolutionary processes, to describe our biodiversity, right? It's no different than the theory of gravity. We observe gravity. It is the observational fact gravity exists. Okay? Nobody says, except flat earthers and weird people, nobody says gravity doesn't exist, right? So we observe gravity. So gravity is a fact in that context, okay? Because again, it was kind of a classification error to say gravity is a fact, as in gravity being a noun. But if we say the theory of gravity is a model that actually explains our observation, that is what the theory of gravity does. It's a way of explaining observations, and it is the most robust and the most experimental that we've done experiments for as far as validation. So therefore, it's the most confirmed model. It is more confirmed than the theory of gravity. So when we teach that the students the theory of gravity, we're saying this is the model that we use, that it holds up, that has a robust predictive explanatory power that we use to explain the biodiversity we see, and that evolution does actually happen. That's uncontroversial. Even most creationists do agree evolution takes place, but then they take liberties in their wording and say, well, what you call evolution, we just call natural variation or natural reproduction. That's a big problem because that's not what we mean by evolution in any way, shape, or form. Does that make sense? Remy?
Also, with regard to your example about, well, let's let them learn these different things, where do you draw the line at that? You could do that in every single subject. You could say engineering, right, we're going to have the standard method of engineering, but we don't want to indoctrinate you in our method of engineering, so we are going to allow you to try out these other ideas about how electricity works and how maths is formulated, and we're going to let the flat earthers, they're going to be in physics.
You do realize that you just brought up a good example, though, that before alternating, whichever came first, direct current or alternating current, I can't remember which came first, that's a feat of engineering and electromagnetic science. So, but before they were discovered or alternating current was manipulated, they weren't exactly taught. They weren't understood. It had to be developed. It had to be stumbled upon. When Tesla came on the field, he didn't say, okay, well, we already have alternating current. He had to come up with a process and find it.
Sure, but he wasn't a 10-year-old student.
No.
He wasn't. That's the thing that we leave to the people who are the experts, who have studied the existing stuff. By all means, when they've spent these years studying evolution, now that they understand it, then they can disprove it.
Well, what is the best model to describe it?
Full understanding of the subject, can they prove it wrong?
If evolution exists, right? Because we demonstrated that evolution process do happen. We know evolution occurs. That again, even most creationists I know will admit that much. They call it micro, but it's the same thing for this.
They believe in evolution with limits.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's like saying all Muslims are the same. You obviously have some cutting people's heads off and blowing up malls.
Yeah.
Because there was a news debate or argument I watched a few months ago where you had a Muslim priest talking to a Christian or a Catholic priest, and the Muslim tried to defend all of Islam, saying there is no. He actually said there is no such thing as a radical Muslim. So I'm thinking in my head, he obviously didn't hear himself, because that means that all Muslims are failing to be radical. Because if the ones that are cutting your head off and killing women with stones and raping your children, if that's the way it's supposed to be, then somebody's wrong. Well, and if all of evolution is saying that all cows came from a whale, then you can't really just simply say, well, because we see in a petri dish genetically manipulated or genetically observed bacteria adapting and being able to kill viruses is evolution, and then say, well, because we also see ducks coming from a raptor. It's just as erroneous. It's just as bland, as broad. Of course, I'm not saying you're wrong.
Well, wait. Why did you? Hey, Matthew, I don't know who you are, but why did you mute him? Oh, he left. Okay, so unmute yourself. I can't turn on. Yeah, troll. Sorry about that. Sorry.
Okay. Of course, I'm not going to say it's an opinion because it's backed by clear evidence. So I'm agreeing to a point. So.
Hang on one sec. The problem that we're running into, though, is, again, there's in school especially, there's only one model that describes our observation. Okay, the evolutionary processes we see, there's only one model that can actually say what explains this, and that is the evolutionary model, right? So what other model would we even begin to teach in school? And I've always seen the creationist point of view that they're saying we're extrapolating information, and in some ways that's kind of true, but if we see an observation today like gravity, and we say, okay, here's the model that shows why two planets orbit each other. When I drop something, it falls. We can go back a million years and say that probably holds true, right? I mean, we can hold to some kind of uniformitarianism, and so the model is still adequate enough to say, okay, maybe how did the planet get here? How did the accretion disk form? How can we describe this using physics? And we can model that, right? We don't have to go back 4 billion years to show it actually happening. Our thing in science is to describe today what we observed, how it happened. So we say, hey, we got these 8.7 million extant species, and we know all these evolutionary processes take place. We know speciation occurs. Obviously, this is a mechanism that shows how this stuff can come about, and we can model it on the phylogenetic tree, on the fossil record, on the genetic level, on the morphological record, on the homologies, and all the way going back to the original first domain.
It's those predictions. It's the thing to say, okay, if this we've seen this speciation event occur in animals that are alive now, we predict that therefore these speciation events will have happened in the past. We look at their anatomy and we say, what, based on their anatomy, do we predict this animal would be related to? You look at the tree, you make it, and then you go, right, now we're going to test this against the DNA. If we think the DNA, if evolution is true, this DNA should match our predicted results. And you test the DNA, and it matches perfectly. Then they say, right, this should also match up with what we know about geography, because you would also have to completely disagree with a lot of stuff to do with plate tectonics, and because this is the thing creationists seem to say, is they disbelieve evolution, but they don't just disbelieve evolution, they disbelieve a huge set of other theories as well. There's just they tend to put Big Bang into part of evolution, but no, you're disagreeing with loads of different things, in fact. But it's all these compounded predictions to the degree that, yeah, there's massive areas of science which actually have less evidence that creationists don't have a problem with. And that's the thing that I always find odd, is that it's not actually a scientific disagreement, because there's areas of science that you could be much more irritated that children are learning in schools that have far worse evidence than evolution. Evolution's got better evidence than a lot of areas of science. But because the Bible doesn't disagree with those areas of science, it's not something they're that bothered by.
Yes. Oh, man. I think I've seen this guy that keeps coming in here. He's a troll.
Bernie Sanders!
So, bye. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why we're getting trolled. We're having like the troll anime fanboys coming in. So.
Kids with nothing better to do.
They've no, it's some of them have actually been on. We had a troll video one time, and actually it was pretty entertaining. So I mean, if they're some of them can be actually pretty cool, but other ones just are not. But we actually had a troll thing where just come in and troll and have fun. Actually, it was pretty cool. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. I think Jacob makes a very good point that. Oh yeah, Ian. That they're not just one science. There's actually multitudes of different branches of science that have consilience toward the age of the Earth, right? I mean, there's dozens of independently validatable sciences that say, hey, the Earth is 4.54 billion years old. So to be a young Earth creationist, it's not just evolution. That evolutionary theory you have to dismiss. It's physics. It's geology. It's a huge slew of these things. And by the way, I'm only pausing in my speak because I'm trying to get rid of some of these people. I'm sorry, if I don't know you, then you're gone, except for Odian. I know Odian. Odian's cool. So let me get Odian here. I don't know you, Chet, or Xander, sorry. Xander, do you want to speak up real quick before I make room for other people? Anybody know Xander? Oh, he's gone. Anybody know... Who's this other guy over here? He's gone too. Okay, never mind. Get some action.
Hey, there's some weird guy called the Rumpus that just joined.
Oh, he's gone.
I think,
Fuck yeah.
I think you better check to make sure
I think his reputation precedes him.
Yeah, I know.
The guy doesn't know what an epiallele is. Fuck him. No, I'm just kidding. Hey, Rumpus, let me get you in here.
What would you... Because you were saying about how there's this massive leap between observing the bits of evolution that we can see today, which, as you were saying, most creationists would agree actually occur, and going, right, this means that these things we see in the ground are related to them. What kind of prediction? Because one of the major things you test is predictions.
Yeah, as I was already touching on, that you don't necessarily have to demand predictions from either one.
Well, from a model,
I wasn't invalidating evolution either by that course. It's just rather, if you want to teach a kid geology, teach a kid geology, but don't tell them it's because how old the Earth is. Just tell them how these things are clearly forming. We can see these things happening, and leave evolution out of it, or not evolution, sorry, leave uniformitarian ages out of it. Because you can teach a kid how, how iron reacts with what have you. You don't have to teach the person, okay, well, it's because of how old and how long it takes, and
well, that would be an appropriate
because it reacts. You just tell a kid, well, you get your equipment and it reacts this way. You don't have to get, you shouldn't have to jump to tell the kid to explain it as such, because that becomes it gets in the way. Sorry,
well, I think you have
clearly a creationist is not exactly going to have a stand on that either.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Hang on one second. I think you have it backwards, Remy. The thing is that like the age of the Earth is not the foundation. That's not the precept, right? We don't assume the age of the Earth is old. That's the conclusion because of the data that we've learned about, right? That's where the conclusion is based upon all the evidence. So when they teach things like geology and they teach things like physics and they teach things like evolution, they all indicate that the Earth is old. So we're not saying to the student, oh, okay, the Earth is old, therefore this. We're saying all the evidence. We look at all the different ages. Look at the Neolithic period, the Miocene period, the whatever period you want to look at, right? We can look at these different strata of the Earth and go, hey, we can show this, and we can show that these take millions of years to get to this, and this one's this many million years ago, and this one was a billion years ago, and everything points to an Earth that's billions of years old, right? We don't start with the model being correct. We start with the evidence being the evidence, and then we evaluate, saying, what can we come up with? What model can we come up with that explains this?
Yeah, I understand. I'm not arguing that, so don't worry about it.
Okay.
Steve, you said something very important there. You said everything points to the age of the Earth, and you're right. Every single thing that you can use to measure the age of the Earth points to the same value there or thereabouts. Not just 1 bit or 2 bits or 3 bits. Every single piece of information we've got that from space, cosmology, geology, physics, rotation of asteroids, solar system, movement of the planets, light, looking into space at the distant objects revolving around another, all point to the fact that the age of the Earth is the age of the Earth, and the solar system and the universe is a particular age. There is no contradiction anywhere.
And there's not even any variance. I think the most variance there's like 200 million years. It's like 4.54.
Which is what you'd expect.
Yeah, that's well within statistical variation, right? You're dealing with 5.4 billion years. Plus or minus 200 billion years is not that much. So.
Yeah. Can I just going to say we need to be careful that we're not turning this into let's all talk at Remy.
Yeah, I know.
Don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it, because I'm just going to start going quiet if I have to. If I have to start talking, if I have to actually start scratching my head, because you guys are implying that I have to be a college major.
No, that's why I was trying to keep it. I was trying to eliminate the science. People were like, "Oh, you want to find people that are not scientific to discuss science to talk over their head?" I'm like, "No, I'm just the opposite. I'm very good at talking normally."
Yeah, I mean, if we want to get back to the original topic of what you guys started, is I could actually flip it back. Okay, so before you guys even knew the concept of evolution or the uniformitarianism or archaeology, what did you guys believe in? What was it that started? If you can remember that far back, what was it that first got your attention to? Was it the word sake of some teacher or your parent, or did you actually try to figure out why do I find mammals frozen in stasis? In petrified stasis in a cross section of a rock, and then that spurned it, or was it what somebody just simply told you in there, and then did that carry on forth?
For me,
that's
a very good question.
If I may.
Go ahead.
For me, okay. For me, it was sitting on the floor of the library as a small child, reading book after book after book on dinosaurs.
That was me.
That was you too? Yeah. As a matter of fact,
mine was astronomy.
the librarian actually went to my mom because I was little. I was like 5 because I could read when I was 4. So I was like 5, 6 years old. And the librarian went to my mom and said, "Do you know what she's reading?" And my mom told the librarian, "Let her read anything she wants." But that spurred my, sense of investigation because here in first grade, second grade, they don't teach you, they're basically supposed to teach you reading and writing, which I already knew.
Mhm.
So that started my investigation on my own. Ever since I was that young, I was reading adult books on paleontology and taking them home from the library. And I went from there to reading books on zoology because I was fascinated by animals. And so that's where I got it. I would read the books and I would follow the explanations of how they knew that dinosaurs were so old. I was also interested in the history of paleontology and how they discovered the first dinosaurs and how they made the first guesses and how they were wrong about some of the first guesses. And that, in that sense, it taught me the scientific process and realizing that everything isn't, 100% confirmed, that there are lots of different voices and lots of new information coming along.
It's all provisional.
That's where it started for me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was the same way about the dinosaurs. I was just fascinated by these things, and then then it was on to fossils, and I ordered a book. And it had like tons and tons in high school. I ordered this book from the library, and it had just nothing but fossils in it or skeletal reproductions, and you could see like how they put them into their groups, by the similarities and body structure and stuff. Where you have your theropods, sauropods, ceratopsians, all this. How they divided them up into this tree, kind of. And that just sort of kept going and building into, see, evolution. I didn't know anything about evolution. I'm just looking at these books and I love dinosaurs. And then that just kind of came out of it as I saw how they went about figuring relationships and stuff like that.
I didn't even know what younger creation was until I was probably in my 20s. I never even heard of it. It wasn't until I got into it, not into it, but I mean, learned about it and realized how I didn't agree with it back about 20 some odd years ago, plus years ago. I before that, I don't think I ever would even have heard of it or even thought that anybody would have thought the Earth was only 7,000 to 10,000 years old.
Yeah, and in Europe and in the UK, we hadn't heard of I hadn't heard of young Earth creatures until about 3, 4, 5. About 6 years ago, something like that, because these things just don't exist in the civilized world, i.e. Western Europe. It's just that poor Americans seem to be stuck with it.
Us dumb Americans, Rumpus. I know.
I know they're playing it.
Wait, I'm drooling. Sorry.
If only, Steve, if only you'd been born in the right place.
Yeah, Rumpus, Ireland is full of it.
Ireland is yeah, but that was a bit underdeveloped. Yeah, that was a bit of underdeveloped Europe, isn't it? I mean,
this is why Europeans get the thing of being pompous, right?
Yeah.
But
we've got a lot of history. Yeah, we've got so much history. We know how old the Earth is.
But Remy, you see, I think we all most of us had similar types of upbringing as kids. We were very, very autodidactic. I wasn't big into dinosaurs, but I was really big into, like, I hate to say it, but particle physics. I loved learning about particles, fundamental particles, and I loved learning about the universe. I don't think, and when if somebody would have told me that the universe is 7,000 years old, and I know that stars are much further away from that. I know galaxies are 13. Some of them are 13.8 billion light years away, right? Then yeah, I would have probably been like, yeah, what? So it wasn't that so much of what we were indoctrinated. It's like, what did we learn? What information are we looking at to say, hey, look, if this star we know is 13.8 billion years away, and I think even creationists admit that, what model do we have that explains that? And in 7,000 years, it just couldn't happen, right? I mean, there's no possible way in any known laws of physics that we know of for that to ever occur. That's part of the starlight problem. And Rumpus here is a physicist, and he would go ape shit,
do that anyway. Yeah. One thing you did say, Steve, was quite interesting. You was talking about how we uniformitarianism and things, and of course we can see that the laws of physics have been the same for many billions of years, because we can see. What was it, that 1987, that supernova 1987A, where we can see things like the hyperfine values and the speed of light was the same then, and the electron, various physical constants. We can see that I can't remember how far back that is now, several billion years anyway, is exactly the same as we have now.
I'm keeping it simple. I'm not going to talk about hyperfine structures and things like that.
Well, basically, we can look back many billions of years, and we can look at observations of supernova explosions and say all the things that are happening that we can see just confirm that laws of physics were the same then, many billions of years ago as they are now, which gives us a real basis for the uniformitarianism you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, actually, they've actually in the last couple of years, a little bit sidetrack real quick. Actually, they've actually developed ways of actually checking the fine structure constant in different portions of the universe as well.
Right, I thought they could do it with the supernova thing. I didn't realize they could do it with other things. Right.
Yeah, there are other methods as well. I mean, but as you said, there's a consistency there. There might be some anisotropes, but even if there is, I think there's different ways of modeling to describe them. Especially you're familiar with cold dark matter and things of that nature. But anyways, we're not going to get into technical science because I told Remy that I did not want to do that.
But the principle we can establish. You were saying that uniformitarianism. We've got a basis for it, even if you don't have to go into the details about how we come to that knowledge.
Does that make sense, Remy? That we can. Okay, I want to bring Remy back into it. I want to feel like he's.
Yeah, I was going to say, if I go back to Remy's specific question, I was going to say, for me, when I was a kid, the thing that made me, because you learn evolution exactly the same way you learn gravity in school. It's, as I say, the idea of someone believing the creation stories would be the same as someone believing the Norse or Greek creation stories to me. They were to me stories. Jonah and the whale is no different to Jack and the Beanstalk when I was a kid. But the thing that got me when I was a kid was looking at animals around me. Once I'd learned about evolution when I was, 4 or 5, I guess. I guess that's when I first start really hearing it on TV when you're a kid, is looking at all the animals around me and going up to my friend's dog and seeing that the parts of its leg are the same parts of the body that I've got, seeing where its thumb is higher up, looking at a horse's feet and seeing that they're on their tiptoes, on their toenails, and seeing the bits of their toes are further up and recessed. Why would that be there? There's no reason for that thing to exist. And seeing that you don't ever see mammals with the compound eyes of insects. Everything fits into its little bit. All the mammals have the same characteristics, and they're all adaptations and changes to the same bits. So whales haven't suddenly got gills or something like that.
And that gets into cladistics a lot. And that's a very good point.
And that's the thing that just as a 4 or 5-year-old child, you can observe and go, this makes complete sense, and this is beautiful. And Remy's left. No,
he said he'll be back in a second, though.
Yeah.
But it's funny that the cladistics does match the phylogeny. I mean, you don't see anything like mammals having composite eyes, right? You don't see anything like mammals having I don't know what some other characteristics. They all have hair, right? Or you don't see them having
red blood,
antennas, or behaving. You don't see mammals with green blood, right? So I mean, there are things.
There's one lizard.
There's one. Okay, there might be. There's always some exceptions to everything, right? But again, you can still make a cladiogram for them and still show in the phylogeny why that particularly does. I don't know.
Yeah, you have examples of convergent evolution, but convergent evolution, you can still see they still had to modify a pre-existing thing. Like you've got moles, you've got European moles and I think it's marsupial moles. Both look really similar. But if you actually look at their bones underneath, European mole has massive forearms, and that's where its muscles are attached to, whereas a marsupial mole has the elbow joint sticks off massively far off, and that's where the muscle joint is attached to, and that makes more of a pivot muscle joint. They look externally very similar, and so you could say, look, this is two animals that have evolved exactly the same thing, but they're both built on pre-existing bits. They've never just popped something into this. This is why I always hated the game. Any of you played Spore? It was.
I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It always used to irritate me that you could just randomly pop a limb out of nowhere on your creature. Like I actually purposefully limited myself by giving my creature only a stub, and then rest of an arm, and then give it proper hands and stuff like that. I refused to just randomly shove bits on because it didn't actually follow evolution.
Well, a lot of people think that though. Unfortunately, a lot of people, their model of evolution is the Spore model or the Pokemon, where things just pop into existence, or one mutation creates this whole big old structure of some kind.
Yeah. I always hate it when they mention Tiktaalik and with fish, and they just say, "Oh, why would it just randomly leap onto the ground and grow legs?" Well, no, and they're like, "Well, this would be stupid." yes, it would be. So why did you suggest it?
Yeah, they have huge misconceptions of what the theory actually states. Odin, do you want to jump in here, Odin, with your soft spokenness? Man
Yeah,
up, man. Grab them cojones. Say something.
No, it's just about being respectful, I guess.
If it's for Remy, you may want to wait until he gets back because he might want to hear what you have to say.
Oh, okay, I guess. But quick note, I did read the articles, the wiki articles, and I actually downloaded the PDF that you guys referred me to. So later,
Be specific.
it's about the what do you call it again? The issue with the Dover trial and all of that stuff.
Okay, Kitzmiller versus Dover, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I guess the cause of the issue. So
Okay.
I did read all of that stuff.
Cool.
So later we'll
Yeah, no,
talk about that.
I'll be down for that. It'll probably be after Veckel's hangout. Again, Veckel and Lyrical Ryan will be having a debate at 4 o'clock on his channel, and I'll be.
Veckel and who?
Lyrical Ryan.
Oh,
I was just wanted to point out that both Fiona and Hogtie know a lot about the Dover trial too, and both sides in this debate frequently get the Dover trial wrong, or the actual ruling and what it said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, just generally speaking, when I was just reading, I guess, the transcripts or just in general about the trial, it was the judge's decision became obvious to me in the middle of the trial. To be honest, just
You think he ruled correctly?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think that's even the most common consensus. The only people that don't were the Discovery Institute people, but even most intelligent design advocates probably, the way things were going and the way things were done, that there was just no other way possible he could rule. I mean, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, wasn't he being a federal judge? They generally don't, but I mean, he could have even gone after a couple of them for contempt. It was so bad.
Yeah, Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's more of the agenda he was discussing, taken into consideration that he is a conservative judge, right? I think it was just the.
And let me point something out here real quick. Jay goes. This goes back into something that happened just recently, and again, I didn't get a chance to make normal housekeeping, so I'll bring it up now. On one of Thomas' videos, I had made the statement that young Earth creationists often have to sign what's called statements of faith. Okay, and what these things are basically saying that they adhere to the young Earth model, that any scientific evidence that goes against it must be inherently wrong, and it goes to that dichotomy of either A, evolution is correct or creationism is it, right? I mean, they try to throw that dichotomy in there, and they even say in Astros and Genesis has one. That says, any facts that seem to go against the biblical perception of the biblical account, creationist story, narrative, which would include young Earth creationism, it must be wrong by de facto, right? By fiat. So we all know we've been around for a while. Most of us know that this is a general policy that most of these sites have, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm gonna get back to remember here in 1 second. And so I just made that out there, and of course. True Pearson in his sophistry was like, well, that's a claim, back your claim. I'm like, look, I am tired of giving evidence for things that I say when I know that nobody reads them, or especially they don't read them, right? And I'm like, I don't care if you call it a claim or not, suck it up. This is what I'm giving you information. Go look it up your damn selves because I've spent too much time giving people references like them that I know are never going to look at it. But people like Odeon and people like a few others that are very similar, I don't mind giving the reference to them, and this is what we did in this Gitzman versus Dover. People gave him the sites, the information, and said, "Yeah, this isn't really to show you that backing up what we're saying. This is for your own edification. This is for your own knowledge. Where you can go verify for yourself, right?" And that's, I think, the best way of going about it. But there's a difference between somebody like Odeon, who I know is going to look into the material, than somebody who just wants to play a sophistry, sophomore game of, "Oh, you made a claim, now back it up." That's juvenile to me, and that's why the other day Truman Pearson made that video that he was in saying, well, Steve made a claim but wouldn't back it. Yeah, you know what? I'm not going to back up anything with these guys unless they come into my room, and then I'll be happy to back it up. But I'm not going to do it on their territory or their time because we know from experience they don't look into anything we've given them, and that happens repeatedly. So I just want to throw that out there. But let's get back to
I think to some deep level they're worried about what they might find. They don't want to.
Well, it doesn't matter what they might find.
They may be wrong.
It's a matter of they're saying that I don't provide evidence. Well, I'll provide evidence on my channel, on my own terms, with people that I think are either intelligent enough or honest enough to go look into things for each other. Like, for example, if Remy wants evidence for something, I will be more than happy to spend hours and hours referencing something if he really wants to look into it. Okay, but that's the difference because I consider someone like Remy to be intellectually honest. You know, there's a difference there. But anyways, let's get back to the main discussion here.
So the main discussion. I think the thing that generally led me into science on a whole was one, as a 5-year-old, I had too much time on my hands and I could read incredibly well. And my grandfather had a lot of encyclopedias, particularly on philosophy and on a lot of the great philosophers, you know, Plato, Aristotle, you know, Kant, Hegel, all of those guys, right? And I, you know, growing up where I was growing up, there was a lot of violence, and I always wanted to understand, you know, why people do the things they do. And just bridging off from that, I always wanted to know how things work, why they work the way they do, you know? And that kind of led me into more deeper things and understing. You know,
I only have I don't have too much longer. But I'm trying to cut people short. But I know I got only about maybe an hour most of this hangout. So I want to make sure we get Remy included back into this. Does that answer your question, Remy?
So you know, to the point. This is my issue with teaching alternate explanations in the classrooms, right? I agree with what Heavy is saying. You know, there's something already set in the syllabus. Regardless of what they believe or, you know, or whatever, right? You go to school, you learn what you're supposed to learn. When you're at home, you can look at the alternate explanations. Now, if a group of people is trying to come up with an alternate explanation, right? I feel as if it should go through certain procedures, whether it's testing, coming up with a robust theory or mechanism, and you know, all of that stuff, and publish papers, right? That's, you know, that supports your theory. Once it's gotten to that point, and you can make a certain amount of predictions, right? Then you can maybe take it, you know, take it to the board of science, where you are in the world, and have that discussion about having it, you know, taught as an alternate explanation, right? Now,
Odin, I'm going to kind of cut you off here because I really got to get back to Remy here. This is about Remy and I having a discussion.
I want to add one more thing to for when I was in school, when I was a kid.
Well, hang on, I'm going to cut you off too, Holler.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to take this back a little bit because.
Okay.
I want Remy to not feel like he's being kind of, you know, 9-on-1, because this is what they say. You know, a younger congregationist comes into my channel, and then everybody else kind of talks, and everybody else kind of doesn't really get much, you know, airtime. So I just want to. If Remy's fine with it, then I'm cool, right? But I do want to make sure that Remy, you know, you are actively engaged in the conversation. If you're listening to what Odin had to say, that's great, and he was right on target, and I would love to have him finish. But I want to make sure that you have equal time to digest what was being said and then respond. Is that cool, Remy?
Yeah, I was on the mic quite a bit.
Okay.
Already.
All right, go ahead, Odin. Finish.
Yeah. So once it's gone through those procedures, then I think it could be discussed about being taught, even in high schools. At least in high school level, kids will have a certain level of understanding of science in general and the scientific method, right? So they'll be able to discern what makes sense to them, right? But until it goes through these processes in my opinion, it shouldn't be put in the book. And if you're going to put that type of stuff in the book, the implications is something that I don't believe you should put in the book. You should just put the theory, right, or your explanation, and that's it.
Okay, go ahead real quick, Heavy, and then let's let.
Yeah, it's just a little quick thing I want to add on when I was in school. It was in elementary school.
How the hell do you remember that far back?
It's not easy, dude.
Yeah.
But it stands out so much because I just love dinosaurs. And see, we didn't study dinosaurs until, really have any kind of thing about dinosaurs until 6th grade. But by then, there was nothing new in there for me because I was going to the library and I would see books and we'd be out in Walmart or something like that, or Kmart or whatever. I'm seeing books on dinosaurs and I'm like, oh, please buy me that. This is something I wanted to do, and there was no indoctrination or anything. This was all on my own. And by the time 6th grade come around and they're telling me about dinosaurs, I'm like, meh, been there.
I thought you were going to say when I was in school we used to go to petting zoos and pet the dinosaurs. But
I think I missed that by a few years.
We had field trips to Brontosaurus.
Steve, that was when I was in school.
They
all died out by the time Heavy came along.
And that's long before the creationist 70,000 model, right?
I was about to say, if I knew Heavy better, I was going to make the joke that his continued life disproves the 6,000-year age of the Earth.
Well, Heavy is actually so old. He actually got a invitation to the Last Supper. Yeah, he got an RSVP. True story.
Yeah, they didn't have lemon pie for the I had to turn it down.
Yeah, he was atheist, and he's like, screw that. But anyways, I've been neglecting the live feed. Sorry, guys. Hey, John and Frenzy, thank you for subbing. That's pretty cool. Why'd you all kick me, folks? Was an interesting conversation. I didn't kick you. I only kicked one person that was making noise. But anyways, Remy. So you asked the question about why we came to our understanding the way we were. None of us were indoctrinated in anything. We all independently kind of studied different branches of science and said, hey, you know what? Yeah, this young Earth stuff doesn't hold any water because their model doesn't work. Every claim they make scientifically is wrong, and we could demonstrate it to be wrong, and some of them even easier than others to be completely wrong. So I hope that answers your question.
It's kind of a bit like if a flat earther said, well, weren't you indoctrinated in school about the Earth being round? It feels very similar kind of question when it's asked to us, because it's like, well, no, I wasn't indoctrinated to the Earth being round. I was given the evidence, and the world matched the evidence. Or, I don't know, a homeopath saying, oh, weren't you indoctrinated into conventional medicine in biology class? Well, no, it works.
I think you're being a little bit overestimating your analysis there. For instance, if I were to ask you how you knew that the the solar system was not geocentric, I bet you would struggle quite substantially to prove that the solar system is heliocentric, and yet that's something you've learned from books and things and simply accepted on the fact that the authority of the education.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree with that, Rumpus. It wouldn't be a struggle per se. I could use different types of things like looking at making a little model system and showing how we can observe the retrograde motion of Mercury. And a lot of different ways to show.
Well, you can do. Well, yeah, you can still get the retrograde motion of Mercury from assuming the epicycles and things.
Oh yeah, if you have epicycle upon an infinite amount of epicycles, you can predict about anything. But but we also go by the law of parsimony, right? And so if it's non-parsimonious, we're not going to have an epicycle over millions of epicycles model. That just gets so convoluted.
There are better ways. There are better ways of invalidating the geocentric model, but things like the fact that if the Earth is rotating, things like Neptune would have to be rotating around us, for instance, at the speed of light. And you can say, "Oops, we know that that's not possible." So there are little things like that that really do invalidate geocentrism. But if you have to think really quite hard before you could prove it. So there's a lot of stuff that I don't think we quite realise that we do accept on the authority of people that we trust.
I agree.
I would agree with that. But if anything, that would kind of make the argument of the flat earthers have more weight then, because then they have more of an argument to say that people are indoctrinated into the idea of Earth being round than those of us who have come to believe in evolution based on the stuff we were taught in class.
Well, I hate that.
Earth has got a better argument for teach the controversy in that situation.
We did eliminate that phrase though. Believe in evolution. That is one of the most pet peeves that I have. Nobody believes. There's no such thing as believe in evolution. That's the same. Do you believe in gravity? Right? I don't think there are. I mean, there are times to use that with a flat earther. You can ask that question. Do you believe in gravity? Right? Because some of them don't think gravity exists. Well, if we say, do you believe in gravity? I mean, evolution. You're actually asking, does evolution not occur to you? And we know it does. Now, I understand when you say, do you believe in gravity, you're talking about, do you accept that the model is a valid model that explains observation? But it really gets into a nuance of a belief over knowledge, right? We don't believe that evolution exists. We know evolution exists. That's a knowledge claim. We believe that the model is an adequate representation of how evolution works and how we have the biodiversity, right? We do believe that model is a correct model to the best of our abilities. That's true. But you got to be really, careful when you say belief, because then evolutionists, or creationists will be like, well, you guys just believe in evolution like we do believe in Christianity, or.
I haven't been in the debate circles for a while, so I've got more into the colloquial, face-to-face conversational thing.
Right.
I think you're overdoing it, Steve, because again, believe, if you start doing it from philosophical terms, of course, you don't know your brain in a vat, and therefore you have to believe that your sensory system's working properly. So almost everything is a belief, and I reject this idea of knowledge.
Knowledge is actually a subset of belief. You have to have belief in truth.
Yeah, but knowledge is there's nothing you know. Tell me something you think you know as knowledage.
1 plus 1 is 1 plus 1 is 2.
Well done. You've picked an example.
Because of axiomatics, because of the famous axioms, we can build the framework of mathematics. Don't mess with me, Rumpus.
That's all very priori stuff.
Come here, buddy. No, just kidding. Rumpus, see, Rumpus always tries to fuck with me.
Let's get.
I did want to. I know.
Oh, go ahead.
I did want to say to me that when I was taught about evolution in school, I was taught it in a Catholic school as the best explanation for the origin of all of the species that we have around here. So I never felt that there was any conflict between religion and science. Oh, and I am a Roman Catholic still. Well, came back to it, went away, came back.
But you're not an inerrantist, obviously. But Catholics are Catholics generally not inerrantists? It's these idiotic Protestant evangelical types, presumably, that are the inerrantists. Because I mean, most religion ditched inerrantism in the 19th century or so. I mean, they didn't even believe in Noah's Ark, as I understand it, in the 19th century. It wasn't until these idiots recently, all the reborn evangelical bollocks that have got involved in that.
Well, there's a research.
Well, yeah, even if you go back to.
Sorry,
I was going to say if I could.
This is the first time that I've kind of weighed in on this. I've been watching my kid there, but maybe we should just refrain from the whole idiots thing.
Well, he's British.
Sorry,
when a Brit uses insults, it's kind of like they're just normal speak for them, because they're not as sophisticated as Americans.
No, it's because we have that extra level of sophistication.
Oh, is that what it is?
Right, sorry,
just out of respect for our guests.
Why do I have to have respect for idiocy? Or culture? I mean, you can argue that culturally they're handicapped by their upbringing and nurture and all that bollocks, I suppose. But I think I've got beyond having respect for people. You've got to tackle these people head on, otherwise you end up with the sort of I mean, obviously Remy's presumably a bit more civilized, but with your G-mans and things, I don't think you can approach them with the respect for their position. I think you have to hit them hard with a hammer.
I agree.
Like I said, you don't have to respect. You don't have to respect the ideas. I said respect the person.
Yeah. Hey, go ahead, Jay.
Well, I didn't identify a particular.
Rumpus, let Jay go.
So I was gonna, yes, Catholics do not look at the Bible as inerrant, at least in the sense of a word-for-word inerrancy. You might have some Catholics say that the message of the Bible is inerrant, but word for word, no. I mean, you can go back to St. Augustine, as I've often mentioned, which was 1,500 years ago, and he made the comment about how Christians should not, well, to paraphrase, Christians should not say stupid things about science because even the pagan knows things like that the Earth is round. St. Augustine knew that the Earth was round 1,500 years ago. So yeah, it's not a word for word literate. Yeah.
Yeah, I must admit, I was amazed by when you brought him up. I'm amazed at his sophistication, actually, of the guy. He seems to have said a lot of intelligent stuff in 400 AD or whenever it was, the 4th century.
Mm-hmm.
He seems to have. He basically realizes the Bible is the work of man and therefore prone to error. It seems to me.
Yeah,
well, even when he did, just let me briefly say this. Even when he did take it literally, he put it in terms of this is what I think. For example, in talking about the Genesis, he thought that the tree of knowledge of good and evil was an actual tree. But what he does is he gives his argument for why he thinks it's an actual tree.
So his opinions are provisional. His opinions are provisional, just like science in many ways.
Yeah.
So we'll bring it back to the topic a little bit. I asked Remy earlier. I said, is this young Earth creation as a doctrinal issue? And he's like, no. So my question to him would be, if he actually looked at the evidence that we're saying supports the old Earth model, and actually can disprove, and literally disprove in some cases, show that there's a falsification there of things like what Hovind has said as far as the claims of a young Earth. Would that be something that he'd be interested in looking at, that kind of evidence? That's what
Believe me, I've heard it all and I've seen it all.
Not for me, though, and I'm very good at this because I've been doing this for a long time, and I've actually got a number of people out of your old, young Earth creationism. As you know, Wayne Fillmore, Hunter Bailey. I think there's another one or two that I'm not going to mention their names, but I think of 2 people right now that are definitely on the fence, that are swinging over away from young Earth creationism. So the way I present the evidence as far as being for an old Earth and that young Earth model cannot be true. I think it's pretty effective in most cases. I think I do a pretty good job of it. So I may have things that you may not have heard before. I assure you. Remy, have you seen my video when I talked to Hovind and I presented him physical evidence based upon his own citations that 2 of his claims were outright wrong, that his citations were wrong? Did you see that video?
Nope.
Do you know who Hovind is, by the way?
Not personally.
No, but Ken Hovind. You know who we're talking about.
Although I've met his son, but yeah.
Okay. I've talked to Eric too. Just recently, a matter of fact. Isaiah had a hangout with him.
But we didn't really tackle him very effectively.
That went south so bad. He get away with a lot of waffle and deflection, and he was allowed to. But I thought he was allowed to get away. I would be much more ferocious in my naturally. Well, J.D. Kane let the precept go thing, and
he was all right. No, I think you're making too much of a fuss about that.
Oh yeah, no, it was. I thought it went south really bad. Jade was just sitting there going, no.
Yeah, I know. Jade's
overloaded with problems because there's like everything Eric was saying was wrong, and Jade's like going to this overload. No, God, no.
That's the problem I find with most debates involving Hovind, is it takes far longer to disprove all of his lies, particularly in a debate where you actually have to go, wait, what did he just say? And you have to find it and go, no, you've just made this up. No, this quote is...
There's a lot of shotgunning that he does. He claims that at one time, but I've actually gone through, and we haven't even in my Hangouts even gone through each one of his claims and show physically where they're wrong. And Remy, there's 2 claims out there with radiometric dating that I can literally show from the source material that he's incorrect. And now I'm not the only one that's done this, but I think I do a pretty good job of it. And I did bring it to his attention. I know other people have, but not to the detail I did, I don't think, because he actually stated that he couldn't go back and correct his handbook. And I told him I wasn't asking him to. I just want to know, would he be using his claims going forward? And I'm sure he will. I don't think for a moment that he's not going to use these claims, knowing, though, they've already been falsified claims. Because he knows they're falsified.
I think I can't believe that he doesn't know how many of them are false.
Well, he does, because I can demonstrate he does.
Just a really good, I can never pronounce it, orator. He's just wonderful talking.
Yes.
And I'm watching him. I sit there and go, if I didn't know anything about science, he would be so convincing.
Oh, yes.
He appeals to common sense.
You guys do know that Kent Hovind isn't the only person in his organization. Well, he doesn't have an organization anymore, really, but or at least it's nothing what he had. He wasn't the only person investigating and researching what he presented. He had a team.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No.
So anything that might have been in his book, and anything anything that might have been in his books, and anything that he may have stated in a previous video was presented to him.
But he promotes it.
Albeit, however, you know, however little research that was put into his claims or his articles, you know, you can't necessarily claim that it was just his scientific.
I agree. Yes, Roman, you're right. You're right. You're very much right. I mean, most of his claims, if not all of them, I mean, that I've seen, I don't think he originated any of them. Maybe for a handful. They all come from other sources. They all come from ICR and a few other places. Right. I agree with you. He's even stated that, and I believe that very wholeheartedly. But the problem I have with twofold. One, he still promotes them regardless.
Yeah, I don't understand his point.
Hang on. And the second thing is that he claimed to be, you know, somebody who taught physics and science and be very knowledgeable. Yet he did no investigatorial processes whatsoever in these claims. He did not check them out because in one case he actually shows a picture in Creationist Seminar number 7 video. He shows a picture of the handbook, the radiometric journal that his claim came from, right? Which was a quaternary stratigraphic in unglaciated America, paper 685 from 1975. He shows this paper, but he cuts off in the frame the most important part, the part that shows that these two entries were 8 years different, right? That would be critical because they were not the same. They were not the same entry. They're not the same mammoth. They're not the same radiometric dating thing. There were two different things dating at two different times, found in two different locations, 8 years apart. Now he chopped that off. He truncated that off the side, and it's notable because I have the original material. So he actually knew that. What's that?
Yeah, see, that's why I prefer to actually. That's why I prefer to mention Northwest Creation Network, because they actually are, or most of them are actually the scientists themselves who are either in actual academic offices or have been, or either that or they're very, very well read on what they're talking about.
Well, this goes back.
So they're not exactly like Hovind and Ham. They're actually people who have actually been hands-on involved in what department we're talking about.
But the problem we run into is, it goes back to what I said earlier, and this is the whole flap that true empiricism was trying to make controversy out of, that we know that these scientists that do these research, and I use that term very loosely here, they actually do have to sign something that says, you know, they have a statement of faith. And to be a scientist, you've got to be objective. Wherever the evidence goes, that's where you go, right? You cannot have preconceived notions. Now, granted, you can make assumptions. There's nothing wrong with making assumptions if they're reasonable assumptions and you can validate the reasoning for those assumptions. Mm-hmm. But to say, I'm going to assume that the Bible is inerrant and that the earth is 7,000 years old, and everything that I look at has to fit that paradigm. And if it doesn't, then the facts are wrong, and we have to figure out why the facts are wrong. Mm-hmm. That's not objective. That is not how any scientist anywhere in the entire world does their methodology, because it doesn't work that way. And so when you say that these scientists are using that type of that kind of mindset to look into the stuff, I have to question: are they really being scientists at that point?
Mm-hmm. Because you could start with a completely different creation myth, and if you signed the same piece of paper for the Norse creation story, then I'm sure you could find bits, go out and purposefully try and find bits for that. But that wouldn't be an honest conclusion.
Right, and evolution is a conclusion. Remember, evolutionary theory is a model that we formulated. It's a conclusion to show an explanation of why things happen. Nobody starts with the position that evolution is true unless you're a kid, right? You're being learned about these things. You've got to start somewhere. Maybe call it bootstrapping, if you will. But scientists go into something saying, oh well, I'm going to start with the assumption evolution is true, that the Earth is old. That's not an assumption. That is a conclusion that they don't have to go through every single time. They don't have to demonstrate every single time that the Earth is old, right? It's already been established. It's a scientific fact. It's consensus, right? So that is not an assumption they make. That's no. That's not an assumption.
Of course, the creationists will say you've made a presupposition that evolution is true. Yes, we have that position, but as you say,
no, it's not. That's not a presupposition, though.
Exactly, it's not a presupposition. It's a conclusion we come to, and then we build on that, just as like you build in geometry. The fact that you've come to Pythagoras' thing, and then you build on that to take something else. So yes, you do have it as a position you hold, but it's not a presupposition. It's not something. A presupposition is something, but we do have dictionary definition is that you don't have any justification for it. We do have justification for it. It's something we've built on something else, and it's just an intermediate step to leading on to other things.
And if people want to attack the presuppositions that scientists do have, I'm all for that. But I never see anybody be able to do it even remotely successfully. There's just because it's so the things that we take presuppositionally are such axiomatic that you can't even get anything more basic, right?
Yeah, that's the key thing, isn't it? Yeah, that's the most basic thing you can have.
It's not like Darwin started with, right, I've got this idea of evolution. How do I make it true? It's a case of, I've found all these things. What I believe is probably wrong. Let's find out what the best explanation of what I'm seeing is here. I'm going to call this evolution.
Well, actually,
and the whole scientific community was persuaded. The scientific community didn't have a presupposition. They said they were forced, due to the evidence, to all change their minds.
And Jade, read what you said in the side chat, just like the first couple lines, because I want to build upon this, because what you said is a very good example of precept upon precept understanding of science. You want to read it out?
The first one where I say one problem?
No, you say just as like a child.
Okay. Just like as a child, you are told that you cannot take the square root of a negative number. They explain imaginary numbers later. And they don't give you all the math for stuff in physics because that requires calculus.
And that's a beautiful summation right there, Jade. Beautiful. Because it's true. Because you can only learn so much. You have to start from the basics or something. And what I've noticed is that people that don't further their education, they stop at that rudimentary level, they'd be the ones arguing to you, Jade. Oh no, you cannot take a square root of a negative number. What are you, an idiot, Jade? How do you not know that? Did you not learn that in elementary school, that you can't take a square root of a negative number, right? Because, and that's what I see when I see a lot of people like saying the evolution is wrong and the age of the Earth is wrong, because I see them at a very rudimentary level that they haven't progressed. And Remy, again, I'm not throwing you in this category here. Don't think that I am, but that they have not progressed further to understand that what they learned in elementary is very basic.
Yeah, similar to that, Steve, is you might initial chemistry lessons you might do what Americans presumably call high school. You learn that mass is supposedly conserved in chemical reactions, and then of course, or reactions in general, mass is always conserved. And then of course later on in life you learn that in fact mass is not conserved at all.
Right, and just like you learn classical physics before you learn atomic,
You're
physics
scraping,
at the atomic level. Oh, I'm sorry. Just like at first, can you hear me okay now?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just like at first you learn classical physics before you learn, physics at the atomic level.
Quantum mechanics.
Quantum physics, yeah. One thing I did want to mention about when you're talking about scientists and, mention Darwin and, he didn't just come up with the theory first and then try to fit his observations into it. When you go back to Linnaeus, Linnaeus designed the first modern phylogeny. Linnaeus was a devout Christian, and as he started to analyze the different, features in different animals, he realized that humans fit in the same category as apes. He didn't like it, but he had to admit that it was true. And so, if you actually look up the original Linnaean phylogeny, you'll see us classified with apes, monkeys, and there's something else he put in there that was incorrect. But hey, he didn't have like all the data back then.
He put gorilla. Not orangutan.
No, it was something non-primate. You can look up the original Linnaean phylogeny in Wikipedia and see it, and I just can't remember. I don't know. I think he put sloths in there or something like that. Yeah, okay.
I think you're right. I think it was some kind of sloth, or one of those types of creatures that kind of like hang upside down. Right.
But given what the information he had, he did a pretty good job. But as I said, he didn't want humans to be in the same category as monkeys and apes and sloths or whatever. but his observations led him to believe that's where we belonged.
I was going to add something real quick about Northwest. I was trying to look at their website to find like staff or scientists or whatever. There's a webcast or something coming up, a big to-do podcast, something. So the presentation exposes the flaws and fallacies of common textbook evidences for Darwinian evolution based on original life experiments, etc., etc., etc. The presentation closes by examining known frauds that are still employed in current textbooks to prove Darwinian evolution is true. Now, here's the speaker, Dr. Thomas Kendall. Let me move down for a moment. He has received advanced training in scientific creationism through the Graduate School of the Institute of Creation Research in Santee, California. Let me move down a little bit more. Let's see. He has also studied Christian apologetics and biblical scientific creationism at California Graduate School of Theology, where he received his MA in biblical studies. He holds a doctorate in philosophy of theology. Okay, what's he know about evolution?
Well, I mean, based on his degree in truthology.
Okay. Well, to be clear, let's remember, folks, I don't have any degrees, so I would, yeah, it doesn't look like he has a background in evolution or biology, but I would have to listen to him.
Yeah, sure. The bigger issue is that they're claiming there's errors in textbooks, and we all agree errors can be in textbooks, but they get corrected, right? But here's the thing. The problem is not that there's so much errors in textbooks, it's that they are misunderstanding and they have their own conceptual problems of they think it's an error when it's not. That's a big difference. If a textbook has an error in it that is saying something that is not quite correct, that will get corrected if it's pointed out. But if I say it has an error because I have a fundamental misunderstanding of something, that's not an error. And in fact, it just recently happened. Faith, Love, Hope had said, well, here's books that still have Haeckel's drawings in it, and I'm like, well, can you give me a link because I don't want to sit there and search, but I did, and the first book that I found actually was in Google Books, right? And sure as shit, it wasn't Haeckel's drawings in there. It was actually Romans something drawing. I can't remember his name from 1991 or something like that. I can't remember, but they were very similar, right? But it even stated that it was after Haeckel, and so Romer, thank you.
Romer.
And so, even though they were very similar, right? But this was a misunderstanding that she was saying, well, they're still using Haeckel's drawings and stuff like that. I'm like, no modern textbook does because that's been down that route, right? And we could argue all day long whether it's fraud or not. I don't think it was. That's irrelevant, right? But the fact remains that they're saying that these textbooks are using stuff that they're not using. I actually had somebody even bring up to me one time saying, well, they've already disproved, vestigial, oh my goodness, what do they call it? Pharyngeal gill slits, right? And I'm like, no, we know pharyngeal gill slits exist. It's a misnomer. They call them pharyngeal pouches. But they didn't understand the argument well enough, and they said, no, this textbook's wrong because they've disproved it and shown that pharyngeal pouches don't exist. And I'm like, you totally don't understand even the creationist argument at that point. See what I'm saying? Because that's not what creationists are saying. They know pharyngeal pouches exist. They're just saying that the drawings that Haeckel used to show some of these ontology recapitulates phylogeny was wrong. We know that, right? That was an outdated model from what, 100 some odd years ago?
Yeah, ontology recapitulates phylogeny.
Yeah. And I wanted to make 2 points about Haeckel's drawings. Well, 3 actually. First of all, you're correct. Most creationist sites that I've looked at, and I looked at quite a few because I have a video that I'm going to be doing as soon as I get my new monitor hooked up. Most creationist sites use Romer's drawings, not Haeckel's. And the difference is Romer's drawings are very crude. They're much cruder than Haeckel's drawings. The second point is when Haeckel put out his first edition, he got a lot of criticism from other scientists for his drawings. And what he said was, oh, come on, basically, okay, I'm paraphrasing, it's like, oh, come on, they're just rough illustrations. We do that all the time. And even today, if we look at illustrations, for example, of the cell, you can go to Google and you can look at the cell and you're going to see drawings. They don't look exactly like the cell. It's just an illustration. Mm-hmm. So that was Haeckel's response. That's the second thing I want to say. The third thing I wanted to say is Haeckel then put out another edition, and you can find all of his editions on Google Books. And because Google has scanned them, so you can actually look for yourself. He then put out another edition that's sort of in color with far better drawings. However, you never see creationist textbooks or creationist sites use Haeckel's better drawings. They always use the ones from his first edition. When they're actually using Haeckel's drawings, they use the ones from his first edition, and those are the ones that Romer just copied. He just redrew them, and they're far cruder.
It's kind of like when I bring up Lucy, and the picture they show of Lucy is like maybe the very first thing they found. They ignore all the other ones that were found.
Well, they have
Australopithecus or whatever.
Afarensis.
They have Afarensis? No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. They have to keep the controversy going. I mean, that's a big thing, right? I mean, they have to say, oh, well, look at this evolutionary fraud that was like from 100 and some odd years ago, which wasn't fraud by any such imagination. And so when they say, textbooks still use this stuff, they don't even know what the controversy was at that point because they're just outright wrong. As you said, nobody uses those drawings anymore, but Hovind likes to ping on that quite a bit. And the Lucy thing, I mean, Hovind even parroted, oh, well, they found her kneecap, miles away, right? He said that in a video not too long ago. Well, anybody who knows anything about this has already done the investigation on it and actually found where that came from. And that has long since been disproven because that was a misunderstanding from a quote from somebody who was talking about a totally different thing.
On top of which, we have something like 300 fossils of Australopithecus afarensis. One find included around 30 individuals, which are known as the first family. So that's the problem. See, it's the disingenuous of a lot of creationists. If you want to argue against Australopithecus afarensis, fine, do it. But use real data. Don't keep going Lucy, Lucy, Lucy as if that's the only skeleton we have, because we've got lots of them now.
And this is the kind of stuff that we talk about.
Are we putting Remy to sleep?
You're breaking up. Is that Holler that's breaking up, or is that me?
Are we putting Remy to sleep?
Oh, are you putting Remy? Are you still hanging in there? I don't know. He said he was fine. He's been side chatting. So
okay.
I'm trying not to ignore him by any means. This is for Remy.
I'm just considering whether or not I should go change my bandage or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. By the way, Remy just had surgery just recently, so we're all glad that he's okay.
It was just yesterday. I had cosmetic surgery.
Ouch.
He's a creationist, so we got a brain transplant. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Somebody had to say something. Come on, it was funny.
I did want to ask when we were off air, but I didn't manage to ask in time, and I felt I didn't want to be rude and ask just in case. So I have been burning to ask you the entire way through this conversation.
Well, why he's wearing a bandage?
Yeah, I was just I can't. I do this in town. I unfortunately. I'm very slightly on the autistic spectrum, and I grew up with people with lots of disabilities, and I always just ask anyone anything. Like, the guy on the supermarket the other day had a huge, patch of skin missing the side of his head. It's just like, excuse me, why have you got a hole in your head? And I can't help but ask people. I've never quite got over the idea that for some reason it's rude. I wouldn't care if someone asked me. I just used to go up to people when I was little. I used to go up to people when I was little because my mum worked in spinal rehabilitation, and I'd just be 3 or 4, just go up to people and go, "Why have you got no legs? Why do you look funny? Why have you got no arms? You have thumbs on your feet. That's so cool." That was my.
I guess it's kind of good in a way because you didn't just stare. Yeah. You actually said, what happened?
And I think most people, they get used to people asking questions, and I think most people are fine if somebody asks. They might find it odd, but they don't take offense. But Mike,
I've never had anyone take offense so far.
Mike said, "Damn, Steve, you need to get on to Kent's channel and start explaining this stuff to these Hovenite creationists." Well, I was on Kent's channel. I got blocked.
Yeah, so, anyways, it's not like I had it's not like I was getting anything changed or removed, like something from Hollywood. What I had removed was a lesion. It was a black and red, about the same diameter as this, on my forehead. And it'd been growing for about 4 years now, and I just got fed up with it.
Oh, okay.
I kept on. Somebody said, "Yeah, we're gonna take pictures." I put on a hat or something like that.
Oh.
So.
Well, I mean, everything's gonna be all right, though, right?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah.
the very corners of the site are bleeding every now and then. So
Yeah.
It wasn't like a transgender post-op thing, right?
You're like,
No, they've had his horns removed.
sorry, but yeah, I'm positive I'll be 60 years old and I'll still have the mojo of a 20-year-old.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
horns.
Can I kid Steve for that?
Either physically or mentally, it'll still be there, one way or the other. So.
Well, it's fun. I mean, like I said, I gotta give Ruby props. We haven't engaged too much because it got kind of sidetracked and stuff like that. But I mean, people are told not to come on my channel by a select group of people, and nobody listens to them anyways. I mean, they have a handful, like 4 or 5 people that they're preaching to. But you know, one of the reasons they don't want people to come in here because we do expose people to questions. We do expose them to actual science to talk about, and we don't go into their channels only for the fact that we cannot have that same respect given and afforded to us. We get talked over, shut down, muted, booted. It's just, and we're done with it. So we're not ever going to I'm personally never going to engage in those rooms. However, anybody can come into mine, right? Anybody. I've never blocked anybody from coming into my room. You know, except that they're on my block list, right?
I found a lot of the Christian things have a Christian-only policy, whereas none of the scientific debates ever have that.
Yeah, I mean, the only people who are blocked coming in my room are people who are actually on my block list. I do have a few. NeoCloud is permanently blocked, and a couple. Actually, have 2 atheists that are blocked. But other than that, it's very, very rare.
Steve, I've been away for the last week or so. Has anything happened on the true empiricism front? I know he's got a couple of new videos. I'll look at those and hangouts and things. Is there any new developments on this chromosome 2?
I think the hangout will go into a lot of overtime if he tries to tell you.
Well, yeah. Well, basically not. I mean, yes. Okay, here's in a nutshell, so we don't go too long. He's quadrupled down on this, and he actually wrote supposedly to Tompkins, and he got a response.
Oh, yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
But here's the thing. All they're doing is parodying the same stuff. We've all read Tompkins' paper, right? We've all read what he's had. They gave him basically stuff we've already looked at, right? That is not what we're talking about, and they're not even giving us the evidence that we're asking for as far as Tompkins' conclusions, right? All Tompkins is saying.
He's still claiming it's transcribed, isn't he? He's still claiming there is a pseudo. And I don't. Does true empiricism know what a pseudogene even is?
Well, yeah, he does. I mean,
he does. Okay, right.
He has a cursory knowledge level, right? I mean, but the thing is Tompkins is saying that there's an alternate splicing or an alternate. I think he heard him say alternate splicing, which is different from alternate transcription. But he does think there's an alternate transcription that actually goes through the entire fusion site.
Yes.
Just because there's promoter regions there, just because what he showed to True was basically different exons. There are transcription binding factors that are on that strand, right? There are promoter regions. Who cares? We know that. That has nothing to do with a damn thing.
Well, I thought they were shown to be the telomere repeater sequences match those anyway, don't they? Isn't it just an accident?
Well, he said, okay, here's the thing that I gleaned out of it. He's saying because there's only like 40 repeats, because the telomere is degraded, that somehow is a problem. Yet in the original paper, it actually says it's degraded because in order to have a chromosomal fusion like that,
exactly,
it has to be degraded.
If it was working properly, it wasn't degraded, it wouldn't have happened.
Right, and these are the questions that we wanted to get answered, right? And I guess CRISPR and Rational Mind, thanks to Philip Vital, might have a 2-on-2 discussion with True and Neffy if we can arrange it, because I'd love to see.
I mean, when I saw that True was making that challenge, he seemed to be happy to take 2-on-2. I was keen on revising up on this and having a go at it myself.
Originally it was they wanted me to engage with them, and this is why they're coming down very hard on me across the board. I mean, I'm a big topic of their discussions, and the reason being is I am not going to play their games. I am not into silly sophomoric sophistry, and that's all that True wants to do. If he wanted to address this stuff, he could have come into my channel a very long time ago. Okay, I've invited him from the side chat, come in here, talk to these people that are actually much more educated on this than I am, because my knowledge is not questionable. I don't care whether I know this or not. We're not deciding whether Steve understands the material. We're not understanding if Steve's right or wrong. We're saying here are people that actually know about the stuff in depth. Let's talk to them, Drew. And he just won't do it. So.
Okay, we're about to lose Remy, I think.
Yeah, Remy, go take care of yourself, man. I'm so glad that you came in here. You know, you're more than welcome anytime. Huge respect to you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, dude.
Lovely to meet you.
Well, it's just you guys are going on your own conversations, and I'm okay with it. Don't feel worried about it.
Is that the Monty Python holy hand grenade?
Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
That's a count to 3.
Yes. No, thou shalt not count to 3. No, 5 is right out.
1, 2.
Thou shalt not count to 2 unless thou proceed to 3. 4 is wrong, and 5 is right out.
We're so nerdy.
Sometimes we get to talking about this stuff and we get carried away.
It's a killer rabbit.
And then what's worse is he tripled down again, saying Fiona lied, which was fucking stupid. I can't. This is when I start getting my righteous indignation, right? I mean, say what you want about me, but to have the balls to say something like Fiona, who has been nothing but forthright and forthcoming with information and knowledgeable very extensively on this topic, to say that she's outright lying to people, I just find that to be despicable. And that's why I want to engage with these people. I just don't like them.
As I've told you, they can't distinguish between lying and reality and truth and false, and because they're so stupid, they can't distinguish between these things. I mean, imagine if you were not equipped intellectually to be able to distinguish between these things. The only defense you would have is that someone's lying to you if it's not agreeing with you. You can't distinguish something as being wrong, and you also, if you think someone's contradicting themselves because you've understood them to understand one thing they've said, and then you believe them to have said something else, then you see they in your mind they've contradicted one another. You say, well, they're lying or they're contradicting one another, but of course that's just because they are confused. They're incapable of judging whether someone's contradicting themselves. They're incapable of judging whether someone is telling them the truth or not because they're stupid.
Well, and I absolutely agree with that. But I also think that they do think Fiona is deliberately lying. That's their mindset, because they can't wrap themselves around the fact that somebody who has this type of education is not on their side, and yet nobody that has any kind of education is on their side except for the very select group of people that have already signed away their objectivity, such as Tompkins, and yet Tompkins won't come into our channel. He got invited, right?
Oh yeah.
And Fiona, like she said in this, I just looked in the side chat. You know, she demonstrated that she didn't lie, conclusively demonstrated that she did provide the information. So I don't know what True is doubling down on, but True has this filter that he has, this contextual filter. Like, for example, this whole discussion I've been having with Tommy, right? True's just jumping on the bandwagon on it, right? And he has no idea what the hell the actual the thing was. And why I was accusing Tommy of lying. It wasn't.
Yeah, I think I must admit, I'm going to come into Thomas' defence here a little bit, because he doesn't understand the difference between Lamarckism and the inheritance of acquired characteristics. And I don't think you've made it absolutely clear, although you've said they're not the same. But I'm not entirely sure you've made it absolutely clear the difference between those two things. I mean, you have accepted that you can get inherited acquired characteristics, but obviously, presumably what you're also saying is that you don't believe that if you acquire a characteristic, you're therefore necessarily going to be able to transmit that to your.
No, that's not the argument. That's not the argument, Rumpus. He's promoting an outdated theory, okay, and that anywhere you look, we'll tell you this theory is outdated. Lamarckianism is an outdated model, right?
Absolutely, but he thinks it's the acquisition of acquired characteristics. Right. So that's what he thinks Lamarckism. So when you he's contradicting himself by.
Did you watch my latest video?
Yeah, I did. Yeah,
how am I not explaining to him that Lamarckianism is more than just an inheritance of acquired characteristics?
You did. Well, it wasn't much more from what you said entirely. You were saying there's obviously two things. That it was the loss of
use and disuse.
Yes, disuse.
There's other things too. I kept it simple there. I made it down to 2 because that's what I got the information off Wiki, and I could have gone further. There are other things in Lamarckianism, but
if that's not much different to saying it's the inheritance of
it's a huge difference. No, it's a huge difference. The mechanism for Lamarckianism is basically mind over matter, right? It is the will that I want, like the giraffe explanation. I want my neck to go longer so I can reach the higher trees. Therefore, I'm stretching it out and using my neck to go higher because my will, right? I'm wanting my neck to go higher. I'm wanting to reach those trees, right?
Right, I don't think you made that point terribly clear in your video.
I wasn't trying to.
I didn't in your video. You didn't. Okay, right. Because that's the. See, that would have been different if that indeed. I must admit, I wasn't. I completely. I was vaguely aware of that being part of the Lamarckism, but I didn't. Well, yes.
I could have got further in that, but I didn't.
Because that would have distinguished it. That would have made a clearer distinction. But as
we have explained that to him before. Rumpus.
Oh, okay, right. Okay.
That's why. Yeah, go ahead.
I have explained it to him that also the very same
so
thing.
So Jade, yep. So is Fiona. We all have.
The very same thing you just said, that the organism's own will makes the trait become different and be inherited later.
Yeah, and so he's aware of this, Rumpus. I mean, that's why it was like,
yeah,
okay.
But the confusion's obvious though, because he thinks, as he said in his video, he thinks Lamarckianism is the acquisition of acquired characteristics. So he's got confused about what Lamarckism is. So when you say you don't believe in Lamarckianism and you say that you do accept that acquired characteristics can be inherited, he thinks you're saying a contradictory thing, and that's where. So he's confused by that those two statements, So he's not accusing you. Because he's confused about that, you could very easily resolve this, I think, by saying no, those two things are different. Therefore, don't accuse me of lying just because I'm saying these two things are different. And I think you've got yourself into a unnecessary battle there.
No, hang on, Rumpus. Rumpus. First of all, I've explained to him why he's wrong, but that's not the bigger issue. The point is, quote, he said, I have said Lamarckianism is true, quote. Okay, not that I accept required traits, but I have said Lamarckianism is true. In other words, I'm saying, hey, by the way, the Lamarckian model is true. That is a lie. Those words have never come out of my mouth.
But that's because he equates.
I understand the situation, Rumpus.
Yeah, but he's not. I don't think he's saying you said it literally. I mean, I'm being generous here with him. I don't think he's saying literally you said that was. But he said because you believe that because he equates Lamarckism with the inheritance of acquired characteristics, and you've said that acquired characteristics can be inherited. He in his head has equated those two things as being the same, synonymous, and therefore he thinks you've said Lamarckianism is true.
I understand that.
So all you need to say to him, I think, is really, Tommy, those two things are not equivalent. So when you hear me saying one, that doesn't mean I'm saying the other. And I think it would be very easy.
I said that in my video, Rufus.
It wasn't quite as clear as I would have liked it to be.
Stick with physics.
No, Bob, don't give me that. Don't give me that. I think you could have tackled it, I think, slightly clearer. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, I appreciate your feedback. Except for you know what? I kept copying shit out of my, when you have Windows Movie Maker, you got this little fucking thing underneath it, right? And I just kept on copy and paste and throw it into this open source Word thing I have, just so I was checking spelling. And for some reason, a long time ago, I'm pretty sure I included Lamarckianism with an E in there, and that's why. And I type that out sometimes. That's my own fault. When I'm typing that, I have been known to do that. And when it just didn't catch it, right? And I don't know why.
I think just as my comment, you could make it a very concise video. Tommy, when I say Lamarckianism, I don't mean this. And so when you think I've said Lamarckianism is true, you're in error because these are not synonymous in my opinion. And I think that's almost all you need to say on it.
No, because he'll just say Wikipedia. No, he'll just say Wikipedia says Lamarckianism is the inheritance of acquired traits, and he's just leaving it at that. He's not looking at all the other things. He's basically making it very.
Is that what Wikipedia says?
Yes, but there's more. No. That's the first line in Wikipedia. But if you go further, then it gets more detailed, right?
Right. So
because people that don't have a lot of science experience don't realize that people, just like this goes back to Jade, and you can't take a square root of a negative number, right? When you don't go past foundational things, right? You don't learn how science works, and you don't learn that a theory, right, a model, you can't pick and choose, right? You can't just say, I accept this part of the theory, but not this part, therefore the theory is correct. It is all or nothing, right?
Right. So I think the way you should tackle that then is to put up a video saying, right, here's the definition of Lamarckism. Do you agree with that, Tommy? Do you see all these extra bits on it? And then you can see that it's more than just the inheritance of acquired characteristics, which is what I've said I agree with. Therefore, can you not see that these are not synonymous? And therefore, so when you in your mind hear me say, I believe in the inheritance of acquired characteristics, I'm not saying that Lamarckism is true. So just you could put the definition on screen, and then what you said, and then you could really very concisely and clearly, I think in very stark language, make it clear to Tommy what his problem is.
Right, but he thinks, but that doesn't change his mindset, Rumpus. He still thinks
I
Lamarckianism.
think if you got on one side, here's Lamarckianism, and here's what you've said, and then you could show, look, it's different in these two. These are the differences between these two.
He doesn't believe me. He doesn't believe me. He doesn't. He believes Lamarckianism is literally just the inheritance of acquired characteristics, and nobody thinks that besides Tommy.
There's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, if he's well, then in which case then you can say, Tommy, you believe this, and here's what the dictionary definition of Lamarckianism is. These do not agree, therefore you are wrong.
I did. I gave him the dictionary. I gave him a definition from Wiki University twice.
Yeah, you did, but don't think that didn't. Anyway, anyway, I'm giving you a hard time, so I'll stop.
Well, like I said, nobody besides Tommy.
Y'all hear me?
Right. Yeah. What say you, Mr. Drag?
Okay, I got y'all connected to my car. Huh?
What say you? I mean, as far as informational content, did I not make my case that Tommy is just wrong on so many levels?
Can I also add something to that?
No, it's something. It has nothing to do with what you actually have said, Steve. It's Tommy's fault for purposely misconstruing what you're saying, because he's always done this. He's done this with Darwinism, modern synthesis. He's done this with Lamarckism and neo-Lamarckism. And there was one other he was getting on, I want to say about 8 months ago, where he would purposely take what you're saying and then refer to an archaic or outdated, or disproven version of whatever it is that you have clearly stated. And Tommy will be corrected on this point several times by several different people, but he doesn't care. That's the part of the problem. It has nothing to do with the delivery. Tommy is just fucking inept, fucking stupid, and purposely dishonest. Absolutely. He has no excuse after all these years.
Yeah.
Hey, Drag, we hear you pretty good. You can talk a little lower.
And no, I like him loud.
Okay.
You like him loud?
Yeah, I like him loud. No, I think
I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. I mean, you can talk in a normal voice, but I can hear you. Yeah, I mean, I see the dishonesty there, and also, when they go into like True's Hangout, I guess he's running one now. See, rather than come into ours, right, they just start their own, which is fine. But Tommy was saying something to the effect that, based upon quote my definition of macroevolution, which is the same definition that everybody uses, right? Because what I'm saying, his conclusion was, well, according to Steve's and his macroevolution, if I decide not to procreate with somebody, I'm a different species. And I'm like, Tommy, how the hell in God's green earth you get what I've said translated to anything contextually the way you can formulate that kind of stupid, idiotic conclusion?
Because Tommy has a retard filter. Tommy has a retard filter. When you say something, it goes through his retard filter, and it comes out in fucking retard speak. That's why he talks to Arcane. That's why he talks to True and Neffy, because that's the language that they understand. They don't act, and Tommy does this to a degree, because when he says that he tries to go out and read some of the scientific papers by actual scientists, I'm yelling again. He tries to read this. He thinks that the big words are there to keep him away from it. He doesn't want to actually expand his knowledge, so it's easier to put things through the retard filter and try and understand it that way.
Yep.
I wanted to point out that looks like Neslig, is that how you pronounce your name? It looks like he and I were thinking alike, because we both posted Lamarck's 2 laws in the inside chat, and this is what Lamarck actually said.
And
rather than
post a link to that in the chat.
You can find it on Wikipedia. Let me give you it's on the Wikipedia article about Lamarck, not on the Wikipedia. I don't know if that one has it. This is not on the Wikipedia article about Lamarckism. This is on the Wikipedia article about Lamarck.
Yeah, I've read.
This shows
also
his
on
laws.
It's also
Go
on
ahead. Sorry.
It's also on Lamarckism.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, it's not. It's just.
I'm looking at it now.
Yeah,
and the 2 laws the 2 laws make no comment about wishing to do something. All they talk about is the fact that more frequent and continuous use of an organ strengthens it, and the opposite's true, which is.
Well, hang on, Rumpus. You got to remember though, in many cases, when people are changing their phenotype, for example, a bodybuilder, working out, according to Lamarckianism, that would be transmitted to the offspring. Okay.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, absolutely.
There actually is I don't want to say supernatural component. But there is a metaphysical component to Lamarckianism that is included, but he didn't know the mechanism. He thought there was a spiritual reasoning for it. Okay, he didn't think. I don't think he was a purely naturalist when it came to that. Okay, but that's where Tommy gets into this whole, essence of these bacteria having intelligence and cells having intelligence and this emergence.
The black box inside the cell bullshit.
Yeah,
But
so I
if
mean,
Tommy-
there's more to this than this as well.
Well, yeah, but if Tommy was just using the first two laws of Lamarck, he could easily he could make a good case for saying, if he was to take the two laws of definition of Lamarckianism, he could make a case for it just being the acquisition of acquired
No, he couldn't.
acquired characteristics.
No, he couldn't. No,
Really?
Carl. Yeah,
No.
what planet are you
I'm
living?
just looking at the first. Well, the
This is
first.
the first one. The first
In
one.
every-
about
okay.
Ireland.
Okay, can I read them out?
Yeah.
Okay, let me.
Trumpets, wait. Before you do trumpets, how many Long Island iced teas have you had so far?
How many what?
Long Island iced teas. Okay, you're British.
None that I'm aware of.
Okay.
How many
Let me-
mimosas have you had? Go ahead.
Okay, let me just read them out. Okay. The first law: in every animal which has not passed the limit of its development, a more frequent and continuous use of any organ gradually strengthens, develops, and enlarges that organ, and gives it a power proportional to the length of time it has been so used, while the permanent disuse of any organ imperceptibly weakens and deteriorates it, and progressively diminishes its functional capacity until it finally disappears. Now, okay, we don't believe that anymore, but let me go to the second law. All the acquisitions or losses wrought by nature on individuals through the influence of the environment in which their race has long been placed, and hence through the influence of the predominant use or permanent disuse of any organ, all these are preserved by reproduction to the new individuals which arise, provided that the acquired modifications are common to both sexes, or at least to the individuals which produce the young.
Well, according to that first law, I should be hung like 3 horses.
And there is, although it is not reflected in the two laws, there is
Can I
an intentionality
interject?
inherent in Lamarckism that is discussed elsewhere. Yeah, go ahead.
The second.
Sorry. Tommy also likes to cite epigenetics as Lamarckism, but it doesn't work because epigenetics is very unstable. It doesn't get passed to more than 3 generations.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also it also says in Wikipedia that epigenetics is not Lamarckianism. They make it very clear that they're a separate thing. Transgenerational
epigenetics because it sounds fancy. He doesn't actually know what it is.
Well, he actually had the other day. He was like, I'm not even talking about epigenetics. I'm like, well, you were. And again, it all boils down to Lamarckianism was a theory. It was a model to describe his observations. We know that model is wrong. Period.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously. Yes.
It was like a hypothesis, I guess.
So him saying that I said Lamarckianism was true in any context, whether it's literal or not, is wrong. Now, moving on. Dragnaut, do you know what have they moved on from me to you? By the way, I mean, have the Crown Car Posse like picking on Drag now? Because I don't mind when they pick on me. I think it's funny. I actually get a kick out of it because it's I'm listening in again, going. We get
feedback.
Who's echoing?
Dragnaut.
Might be me. Sorry.
Oh, I mean, I'm listening and going, God, these fucking people are just stupid. I mean, there's just no other way to say it. I mean, the Clown Car Posse are just so damn scientifically illiterate and contextually clueless. I can't even fathom how they think in any way, shape, or form that they're correct on anything when so many people are telling them they're wrong. If I got 40 people telling me I'm wrong on something, I'm going to investigate it, right?
I would at least think about it, a little bit.
Yeah. Especially something as basic as like DNA degrading in water. He still won't let that one go, right?
Tommy's upset that I keep pointing out how stupid him and a few others are, but there's only so many nice ways for me to say that. Like, there's really, I don't know. I really don't.
Yeah, and they won't take correction. Like I can be saying something, and y'all go, wait, and y'all tell me where I was wrong. What's the problem with that? And you try to correct them, and it's like, oh no, can't have that.
And the side chat here. By the way, Drag, can you mute for a sec?
Oh, sorry. Y'all hear me breathing?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. There's a strong echo.
Do you have headphones? That would help.
Okay. You know, Christopher and Javi in the side talk chat, not to get into this too much, you guys are talking about bacteria having intelligence. They don't communicate. They don't have intelligence. There's a communication that goes on. It's a chemical communication, yes, right, Javi? But we don't call that intelligence, okay? And all that chemical communication is, and we've described it many times. Fiona did a long explanation of this because she knows about this very well because she did research on it. It's about cell signaling, right? And it's just basically an amount of concentration of a chemical that these cells have sensors for, right, that can actually detect concentration levels and then react if the concentration threshold is met. So if there's
feedback inhibition.
What's that?
It's called feedback inhibition.
Feedback inhibition for the cell transduction. So we've talked about this before, but this is not intelligence. Nobody calls this intelligence. It's like someone put in the side chat. There's no intention behind the communication. It's dumb communication. It is technically a communication, but it's not intelligent communication, right? And go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to add something here because I just something popped into my head as they're doing this. You know how so many creationists are now saying that plants are alive?
Oh, yeah.
The whole problem with what did animals eat, before the fall. Plants communicate in the same way.
Yes.
Plants communicate chemically.
Yeah, trees have been doing that for a long time.
For example, if a plant is attacked by something, whether it's a fungus or a plague of locusts or something like that, it will send out chemicals. Well, not all of them, of course, but it can send out chemical signals through its roots to tell all of its relatives, help. And those relatives will use those chemical signals to create changes in their physiology to help repel the invader. So if we're going to say that this is communication, then plants must be intelligent.
Yeah, I mean,
and they must be alive. Alive.
Well, I agree they're alive, and I agree that there's a form of communication there. That is not intelligence, though.
No, but what I'm saying is you creationists are going to say that if bacteria have intelligence, then plants must have intelligence too.
Yeah, they
plants are vastly more sophisticated than the bacteria, in my opinion.
Yes, yes.
And plants meet a whole lot of the qualifications for living things.
Yeah, they really can't have it both ways. They say plants can communicate in one aspect, and they say, well, plants aren't alive. Well, which is it then?
Yeah, exactly.
How does it work with no death before the fall?
Well, that's a big thing they got to get around, right? I mean, this goes back to what I was saying before. They have their conclusion already drawn that the biblical Bible is inerrant and literal, and Genesis is literal, and they formulate their science around that. And so no matter how kooky or cocky or mind-bogglingly stupid it is, that's what they got to go with if that is a way of getting them around having to say that they're wrong. Right?
But what's so stupid about that is historically, whether you're looking at Jewish tradition or early Christian tradition, death does not mean physical death, for goodness sakes.
But again,
Yeah, I know they take things, but they quite creatively take things literally, and then they will take other parts and say, "Oh no, that's not literal." Like when you try to bring up, I've done this before, the cure for leprosy. That's not literal. Well, okay, fine.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, but their version of death must mean physical death, and it's not. Again, that's a fairly new concept, just like the modern fundamentalism we have and younger creationism both date to the early and mid 20th century. They don't understand that their religious beliefs are new. They have this mythology that Christians always believed the way that they did, and that the early Christians always believed it the way they did. And one of the excuses they have for this, or the rationales, is, well, the Christians right at the time of Jesus or right afterwards believed the way we did, but we have no evidence of that. Zero. We don't have much in the way of writings from the 1st or 2nd century. So that's just totally made up on their part.
They also believe that the snake in the garden was Satan, even though nowhere hints that.
Exactly. They also think that Lucifer is Satan. That's not the same thing. It's it's bad. Their theology, the way it's based on their interpretation of the Bible, is actually really bad.
Well, if they can't even get things like science contextually correct, you think they're going to get things like the biblical thing correct? Because there's so many different interpretations of that. It's ridiculous. That's up for far more, contextual reading into things. I mean, you got your hermeneutics and your exegesis and all this other stuff, and you're like, I'm going to read it this way and that way. Here's the thing about the Bible, right? I'm going to say it outright. Nobody fucking knows, okay? We all say we all read into it what we want to read into it, but nobody knows the original intent of the authors. Nobody knows if what parts are true, what parts not true, what part has a scribal error. We don't know. Period. Nobody could ever know.
I want to say that.
Can I tell you? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Jake.
Oh, I was going to say I just want to tell you my favorite part of one of their, or at least one of their arguments. When they say that if a fool says in their heart there is no God. And they use this to accuse atheists of being fools. Well, see, it says right there, a fool says in your heart there is no God, so you people are fools. Well, there's 2 points to this. One is which it's in Psalms, you nitwits. It's in a book of songs. The second part is that is a basic logic fail that none of them seem to understand. Because if you put it in an if-then, it's if someone is a fool, then someone does not believe in God. We know that the reverse is not true. It's like saying, if something is an apple, then it is a fruit. The reverse is not true. If something is a fruit, it is not an apple. So if someone is a fool, then someone does not believe in God, does not mean that if someone does not believe in God, someone is a fool.
Oh,
Basic
wow.
logic fail. They don't even freaking seem to get that. Even if you're going to accept that, okay, it's from Psalms. And say that's, but yeah, it's absolute, logic.
You can't take the reverse, right? I mean, you can't just say that anybody says that God doesn't exist. You can't equate them as a fool because that's improper logic.
Exactly. They use that argument all the time. Sorry, Drag.
I was going to say, I think I know. I don't think it has anything really to do with them being Christian, because I know they like to make it, people are just mad because we're Christians and that sort of argument. I think this is steeped in this notion, this very American notion of anti-intellectualism. They don't want to learn enough about their own theology, so they'll take the easiest route that they can take by just taking whatever they want literally. And that will preclude them from actually learning anything about science or any other topic. So it is the lazy man, lazy woman's way to approach any given topic. And that's how they're having to now struggle with trying to reconcile it with actual science and actual theology. So, I mean, they're only doing a disservice to other Christians, because it's like, well, you do have Christians who go to length to say, you know what, I'm actually going to read this book and acknowledge it for the work of art that it is, as far as it being a literary piece, a compilation of many different literary pieces, and I'm going to read it as such and interpret it as such, instead of just saying, you know what, I'm going to look at this as if it's a dictionary and pick and choose whatever I want and then just go from there.
Yeah, but this is the issue with that. If you just see it as just a literary piece and that's it, and then claim that you believe the God that's obviously written about or mentioned in there, then what basis is your belief? That automatically says that your belief is just basically nonsense.
No, I mean,
because
wait.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how you're making that connection. If I understand that something is a parable, as far as how it's written, and as far as in literature how parables are written, then that's going to help me discern whether something is to be taken literally or not.
Yeah, that's true, and I'm not disputing that. But that's the issue. That's another issue with the Bible, I'm willing to admit, is that I guess for some people it's hard to tell what's a parable from what's not. And there's also a contextual issue, because certain things might be said, but it might be said referring to a particular context or situation. You get what I'm saying? So, and sometimes, other Christians, they would take these things out of context and apply it to other contexts.
Yeah, oh no, I wholly agree with that, and that's what I say. That's where it comes down to being an educated Christian instead of just being a Christian.
But did you guys see the thing I posted from I think it was in ICR, that actually said science is the enemy, and they use science quote unquote, right? And because they have to draw this wedge that actual science is not real science, right? They wanted to denigrate actual science and think that creation science is the active science,
right.
And that's the point that they're trying to make. So when they're saying that people are against science, they're saying they're against secular science, right? They're saying, and they not that there's differentiation, but they're saying that secular science, of course, to creation science, the secular science is evil and wrong and bad, and yet we all know that creation science is, just even call that science, it burns my lips, right? My tongue actually kind of, hurts to even say that kind of thing, because we know now creation science is not science. And even Wayne, hey Wayne, have you taken down your stupid creation science thing from your page yet? Hang on, Wayne, have you taken that down yet? I mean, seriously, brother, it's been how long now that you need to take that down? By the way, I'm going to be ending this soon. I'm going to promote again on Veckel's channel. There's going to be the debate and all debates. It's going to be Lyrical Orion and Veckel.
What is the debate about?
It's going to be called. I don't know if they have a title, but it's going to be on the Trinity.
Ooh, interesting.
And even though I'm an apatheist, so it's not really my area, but I think it's going to be very interesting. I think that both sides, from what I've seen so far, will have a very good dialogue, and I think it's going to be very interesting. So even if you're not that religious, I think it's something worth looking at. Because Veckel had a good hangout before he got on GMAT against something, and I got to admit, Veckel does his research. I mean, he does do good hangouts when he does this kind of stuff.
Steve, when is that on?
It'll be in a half hour.
Okay.
Okay, I wanted to say I've got to go. Of course, you're going to be closing it down pretty soon anyway, but I've got to go. I just wanted to say one thing going back to the Bible and talking about language just briefly, because we are thousands of years removed from the language that the Bible was written in, and language changes rapidly.
Yes.
And I want to give a very simple example, and it's one that causes us problems today, and that is Darwin's title of his book. Because he uses the word race. He uses the term favored races. Now, that wasn't that long ago when Darwin wrote that historically. And I know a lot of us might think it was a long time ago, but my grandparents were born in the late 1800s. So that's, in human terms, that's just a couple generations for me. But the word race back then did not mean what we think it means now. Which is clear if people bother to read Darwin's book, because I think it depends on what edition, but something like page 7, it talks about the races of cabbages. Back in that time period when Darwin wrote The Origin of Species, the term race meant a group of anything. And yet you will see people, especially creationists, argue today that Darwin was a racist and that evolution is racist because Darwin used the word race. So even within this short period of time, we have a huge controversy over one word. So go back a couple thousand years for the New Testament, and 1,000 years or so later, before then, depending on when it was written down, and there's some new information but I'm not going to go into that. But, at the most, 1,000 years when it was written, and think about how language has changed so much in that period of time. So it's very difficult to be so certain, as these people are, of exactly what things mean, especially in the Old Testament. With the New Testament, well, nobody speaks Koine Greek anymore. However, not long after that, we did have people writing in Latin, and because the Church and science both preserved Latin for so many centuries, we can have a better window into what the Old Testament meant by looking at the Latin.
Isn't it though that's how you read the Bible though? I mean, using hermeneutics. Isn't that how you use, like, you're supposed to read it in the way it was supposed to have been written at the time?
Right, but the problem is, what do we know about the time of the Old Testament? That's where we get into the problem with these young Earth creationists and their literal interpretation of the Old Testament. I mean, there are arguments about what the New Testament means, but you can at least have a better context because we do have a better window into that period of time. But for the Old Testament, not so much, especially when a lot of the early books were oral tradition for a very long time before they were written down, or that's what scholars think. So to say that something in the Old Testament, like the Genesis accounts, or Noah's flood, or Joshua, Joshua's long day, or Jonah being eaten by a whale, to say that these things are absolutely true the way that they're written is not really so, because we don't have a very good window into that period of time. Even anthropologically, we don't. And for what we do have, you're going to have a lot of people arguing about, well, the people who wrote at the time were different. I'm not saying this quite properly, but let me give you an example.
Hey, Jed, I got to shut this down.
Okay, let me just quickly give you one example.
By 3:30, so
shut it down. Okay, just quickly. When we get into the ages, people living 900 years, 500 years, or whatever, and you try to point out that they were using Babylonian numbers, which is base 60, you'll find people go, "Oh no, they weren't." But
yeah. I got to show. Okay. Anyways, guys, thank you for showing up. Vito, so you got here late, buddy.
That's okay. Sorry, man.
Thank you. I'm probably going to have a hangout later on after theirs.
All right, send me an invite.
Okay.
So,
yeah, I want to invite too, please.
And everybody, like I said, go to Veckel's channel, and it should start in about a half hour. Okay, guys?
What channel? What's the name of the channel?
Veckel.
How do you spell that?
VEKL. There we go. I'm stopping broadcast.